Hey guys, you're standing in a dimly lit medieval kitchen, the air thick with the scent of wood smoke, and something questionable simmering in a cauldron. A cook apron stained with who knows what stirs a pot that looks like it's plotting its own escape. You thought medieval meals were all hearty feasts and frothy ale, didn't you? Well, brace yourself because those romantic banquet scenes hide some stomach churning secrets. Forget the Hollywood glow of golden turkeys. Medieval dining was a wild, sometimes horrifying adventure that'd make your modern fridge look like a sanctuary. As you settle in, maybe your fan is humming quietly, or your favourite blanket is draped just right. Let's unravel the bizarre truth behind what filled those ancient plates. From ingredients that sound like wizard potions to cooking methods that'd give Gordon Ramsay nightmares, we're diving deep into the dark, deliciously weird world of medieval food. Oh, and if you're loving this dive into history's strangest kitchens, tap that like button or drop a comment about the weirdest meal you've ever tried. It's like tossing a coin to your storyteller, and it keeps the fire burning. The world outside is slowing down, so grab a cozy spot, and let's explore why you'd never want to RSVP to a medieval feast. From here, we'll uncover the shocking dishes, the sneaky tricks, and the downright dangerous bites that defined dining in the Middle Ages. Ready? Let's step into the shadows of the past. Why did medieval peasants eat like they hated themselves? The sun barely creeps over the horizon, painting the sky a weak grey, and your stomach's already growling like a stray dog. You stumble out of your lumpy straw bed, the air in your cramped hut thick with the smell of damp wood and last night's fire. Your bare feet hit the cold dirt floor, and you shuffle toward the rickety table where breakfast waits. There it is, a greyish lump of barley mush sitting in a chipped wooden bowl, looking like it's mad at you for existing. You grab a splintery spoon, take a bite and wince. It's gritty bland and sticks to your teeth like wet clay. This is your morning. Your every morning in a tiny village where the world feels like it's trying to starve you. You're a peasant scratching out a living in a time when survival is the only goal. Your days are spent bent over in muddy fields, coaxing stubborn rye and barley from the earth under a sky that's either dumping rain or baking you raw. The crops you grow are your lifeline, but they're not exactly a buffet. Most of what's in your bowl comes from those fields. Barley, rye, maybe some oats if you're lucky. You grind the grains yourself, your hands aching from the heavy stone quern, turning hard kernels into coarse flour. Mix it with water, maybe a pinch of salt if you've got any, and cook it over a smoky fire. The result? A lumpy porridge that tastes like disappointment, or maybe a flat, rock-hard bread that could knock out a horse if you threw it. Vegetables. Sometimes you get a turnip or a cabbage, but they're usually half-wilted, speckled with dirt, and tough as leather. You chew them anyway because it's food and food keeps you alive. Your meals aren't about flavour or joy, they're about not dying. The harvest is never guaranteed. Too much rain, too little, or a swarm of bugs can wipe out half a year's work. When the crops fail, you're scraping by on whatever's left in the pantry, which might be a handful of mouldy grain or a few shriveled beans. Even in good years, there's barely enough to go around. You've got a wife, 3 kids, and a mother-in-law who glares at you like you invented hunger. Every spoonful is rationed, every crumb fought over. You dream of meat, but that's a fairy tale. A skinny chicken might end up in the pot once a year if it stops laying eggs and you can't trade it for something better. Pork beef, those are for the Lord up in his fancy hall, not for you. If you're really desperate, you might snag a fish from the stream, but it's tiny, bony, and tastes like mud. Mostly you're eating to fill the hole in your gut, not because it's good. Up at the manor, though, it's a different world. You see it sometimes when you haul your grain to the Lord's storehouse as your yearly tax. The air there smells of roasted meat and fresh-baked bread, the kind made with fine wheat flour, not your gritty barley scraps. The Lord and his family sit at long tables tearing into platters of pork venison and soft golden loaves slathered with butter. They've got spices, actual spices like pepper and cinnamon, things you've never even smelled. Their leftovers, the bits they toss to the dogs, look better than anything you've eaten in years. You grow the food you and your neighbours breaking your backs in the fields, but the best of it goes to them. What's left for you is the dregs, the coarse grain, the bruised vegetables, the stuff that's one step above pig slop. It's not just the food that's unfair, it's the whole system. You're tied to this land working for a lord who owns everything. The fields, the mill, even the oven you bake your bread in. Want to grind your grain? Pay a fee. Want to bake another fee. You're lucky if you have enough left to feed your family after the Lord takes his share. And he's not the only one with his hand out. The church wants its cut too, a tithe of your crops or coins you don't have. By the time everyone's paid, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel, literally and figuratively. Your bread isn't just food, it's a brick of resentment, heavy with the weight of a world that doesn't care if you starve. Sometimes you hear stories from travellers about far-off places where people eat better, but that's hard to believe. Your whole life is this village, these fields, this endless cycle of work and hunger. Still you find ways to cope. You tell yourself the barley mush isn't that bad if you chew it fast. You swap tricks with your neighbours like boiling cabbage, with a sprig of wild thyme to make it less bitter, or hiding the weevils in your flour by toasting the bread extra long. You laugh about it, because what else can you do? One guy, Old Tom, swears his bread's so hard it doubles as a shovel. You all chuckle, but it's not really a joke. Your teeth ache from gnawing on that stuff, and you're pretty sure you cracked a molar last month. If you squint, your life isn't so different from some folks in the modern world. Picture someone grabbing a greasy burger from a drive-thru, not because they love it, but because it's cheap and quick. It's not roasted pheasant, but it fills you up same as your barley mush. Or think about that sad gas station sandwich, wrapped in plastic, the bread soggy, and the meat suspiciously grey. You'd eat it if you were starving, just like you choke down your gritty bread now. The difference is you don't have a choice. There's no market down the road, no coins in your pocket to buy something better. This is it, day after day, until your back gives out or the plague gets you. The real twist, the thing that stings like a slap, is the irony of it all. You're out there in the fields, dawn to dusk, growing golden, wheat, plump vegetables, even fruit from the orchard. Your hands blister, your shoulders ache, all to produce this bounty, but you'll never taste it. The wheat goes to the Lord's table, ground into flour so fine it's like silk. The apples, the peas, the carrots carted off to the manor, or the market where someone with money can buy them. You're left with the scraps, the grain too coarse for the rich, the vegetables too ugly for their plates. Your bread, that dense, chewy slab, could prop open a door or sink a ship. You've heard the noble kids use your kind of loaf as a plate, piling their meat on it, then tossing it to the pigs. The pigs eat better than you do. You try not to think about it, but it's hard. At night, when the fire's dying and your kids are asleep, you lie awake, stomach rumbling, and wonder why it's like this. You're not lazy, you work harder than anyone. You're not stupid, you know how to coax life from the soil. But the world's built to keep you down, to keep your bowl filled with mush while others feast. Still, you get up the next morning because you have to. There's another field to plough, another sack of grain to haul, another day of pretending this food doesn't make you want to cry. You take another bite of that barley mush, gritty and cold, and tell yourself it's enough. It has to be. Was medieval bread secretly a war crime? The air in your tiny hut is thick with the sour tang of smoke and sweat, and your hands are dusted with gritty flour as you knead a lump of dough on a warped wooden table. It's dawn, and the village is just stirring, cocks crowing, carts creaking, and your neighbour coughing like he's trying to summon a demon. Your stomach's been gnawing at itself since yesterday, and all you've got to look forward to is bread. Not the soft golden kind you've heard the Lord's family eats, but your bread, a dense greyish slab that feels like a punishment. You slap the dough one last time, toss it into a clay pot, and shove it into the embers of your fire. As the smell of baking fills the room, not warm and comforting, but sharp and slightly off, you wonder if this loaf will be the one that finally does you in. Bread is your life. Breakfast bread. Lunch bread with a side of more bread. Dinner. If you're lucky, bread with a smear of rancid fat or a scrap of cabbage. It's the backbone of every meal, the thing that keeps you and your family from starving. But calling it bread feels like a cruel joke. You start with rye or barley, whatever grain you can scrape together, after the Lord and the church take their cut. You grind it yourself, hunched over a stone quern, until your shoulders scream, turning hard kernels into coarse flour that's more grit than powder. Sift it? Not a chance. There's no time, and you can't afford to waste a speck. So your flour comes with bonuses, bits of straw, tiny pebbles, and the occasional dead weevil. You mix it with water from the stream, which is cloudy on a good day, and a pinch of salt if you've got any left. Knead, shape, bake and pray. That's the recipe. The problem is your bread is a gamble. Half the time it's not just tough, it's dangerous. Last summer your flour sack sat too long in the damp corner of your hut, and by the time you used it, the grains were speckled with fuzzy green patches. You scraped off what you could, but the bread still tasted like mildew and left your tongue tingling. Mould is a regular guest in your loaves, creeping in when the harvest gets wet or the storage sacks rot. You've learned to eat around the worst bits, but sometimes you miss a spot, and your stomach twists for hours, leaving you curled up on the dirt floor sweating and cursing. Then there's the dirt. Not just the kind from your unwashed hands, or the table you knead on, but actual soil ground into the grain from a sloppy harvest. You feel it crunch between your teeth like you're chewing on the field itself. And the bugs, oh the bugs. Your grain sack is a bustling insect village with weevils and beetles throwing parties in every handful. You try to pick them out, but it's a losing battle. Some end up in the dough baked right in adding a faint bitter crunch. Your kids, bless them, don't even blink anymore. They just chew and swallow, too hungry to care. You've heard stories of city bakers using clean flour, but that's a fantasy. Out here in your muddy village, clean is whatever doesn't kill you outright. You've eaten loaves that looked like they were moving before you baked them, and you're still here, so maybe it's fine. Maybe. But the real terror isn't the dirt or the bugs, it's the rye. Most of your bread comes from rye because it grows better in the sour, rocky soil around your village. It's hearty, cheap, and fills you up. But sometimes the rye goes bad in a way you can't see. There's this thing, a poison, called ergot, that grows on damp rye stalks. It looks like little black spurs easy to miss when you're harvesting in a hurry. If it gets into your flour, it's like inviting the devil to dinner. You heard about a village a few miles away where half the people went mad after eating bad rye bread. They saw things, monsters, angels, flames screaming and clawing at the air. Some got so sick their fingers turned black and fell off like the flesh was rotting from the inside. You check your rye as best you can, but every time you bake, there's a flicker of fear. Is this loaf going to feed you or send you to the grave? You'd think the bakers would help, but they're no saints. The village baker, a wiry man with a permanent scowl, runs the only oven big enough for everyone's bread. You bring him your dough, pay a coin or a handful of grain and hope he doesn't cheat you. But you've heard the rumours. When flour's scarce, he's been known to stretch it with anything he can find: chalk dust, sawdust, even ground up bones from who knows what. It's not like he's serving the Lord. His customers are peasants and nobody's going to complain. The chalk makes the bread oddly smooth, but it sits in your gut like a stone. The sawdust. You're picking splinters out of your gums for days. And the bones, well, you try not to think about it. But sometimes the bread has a faint, greasy aftertaste that makes you gag. You eat it anyway. Hunger doesn't care about principles. It's not just the bakers playing dirty. You've done it yourself in desperate times. Last winter, when the harvest was thin and the mice got into your grain, you mixed in some dried acorns you foraged from the forest. They were bitter and made your mouth pucker, but they bulked up the loaf enough to feed your family for a few extra days. You've heard of others doing worse, grinding up old straw or dried peas that were half rotten. Nobody talks about it openly, but everyone knows. When the choice is starvation or a questionable loaf, you choose the loaf and hope for the best. If you think about it, your bread isn't that different from some modern disasters. Picture a sketchy discount store, the kind with flickering lights and expired yogurt in the back. They've got a rack of bread loaves, cheap and plasticky, that's been sitting in a damp basement for weeks. The crust is soft with mould, the inside's stale, and there's a weird chemical taste like it was baked with floor cleaner. You'd hesitate to eat it, but if you're broke and starving, you might. That's your life, except there's no health inspector, no recall notice, no government stepping in to say this bread's a crime. Back then, nobody cared if your loaf was poison. You ate it or you died and the world kept turning. The worst part, you work so hard for this garbage. You're out in the fields dawn to dusk, planting, weeding, harvesting all, to grow the rye and barley that end up in your bowl. Your hands are calloused, your back's permanently bent, and for what? A loaf that's half dirt, half despair. You've seen the bread at the Lord's Manor when you deliver your taxes. It's white soft, made from wheat you'll never afford, baked fresh and served with butter that smells like heaven. The Lord's dogs get better scraps than your best meal. You're the one growing the grain, but you're eating the dregs while the rich stuff themselves and toss the rest. Sometimes you laugh about it, because crying's too exhausting. At the tavern, when you can spare a coin for a mug of watery ale, you and your neighbours swap stories about the worst bread you've eaten. One guy swears he found a mouse tail in his loaf last week. Another claims his bread was so hard he used it to patch a hole in his wall. You top them all with the time your loaf was so mouldy it glowed faintly in the dark, but you ate it anyway because it was that or nothing. You all laugh, clinking mugs, but there's a bitterness behind it. This is your life bread that fights you bread, that might kill you bread. That's more enemy than food. Still you keep baking, keep eating, keep surviving. Every morning you pull another loaf from the fire, brush off the ash and cut it with a knife that's seen better days. You tear off a chunk hand pieces to your kids and chew slowly, ignoring the grit, the sourness, the faint crunch of something that's probably not flour. It's bread, it's life, and it's all you've got. You swallow, wipe your hands on your tunic, and head back to the fields, hoping tomorrow's loaf might be a little less awful. It probably won't be. Did nobles eat like kings, or just flex on everyone? The hall is alive with noise and heat, a dazzling blur of colour and chaos that makes your head spin. You're seated at a long oak table draped in crisp white linen, surrounded by lords and ladies in velvet and silk, their jewels glinting in the torchlight. Servants bustle around you, their arms laden with platters that smell like nothing you've ever known. Roasted meat, sharp spices, and something sweet that makes your mouth water. A whole swan feathers, reattached to look like it's still alive, is paraded before you, its golden beak gleaming. Next comes a peacock roasted, and posed as if it's strutting its tail fanned out in a rainbow of blues and greens. The air is thick with the clink of silver goblets, the laughter of the wealthy, and the faint strum of a lute in the corner. You're at a noble's feast, and it feels like the world is showing off just for you. Your plate is piled high with things you can barely name. There's a slab of venison dripping with a dark, peppery sauce that burns your tongue in a way that's both strange and thrilling. Beside it, a slice of pork crusted with herbs you've never smelled before, so tender it falls apart under your knife. A servant drops a strange, wrinkled fruit on your plate. An orange, they call it, shipped from some far-off land where the sun never stops shining. You peel it clumsily, and the sharp, sweet juice stings your fingers, unlike anything your village's muddy apples could dream of. Then there's sugar, the ultimate brag sprinkled over a pastry that crumbles like a cloud. Sugar's worth more than your entire hut, maybe your life. And here it is glittering on your food like tiny diamonds. You take a bite and it's so sweet it hurts your teeth. But you keep eating, because this is what it means to be rich. The table groans under the weight of it all. There's a whole boar, its tusks polished, its skin crackling and glazed with honey. A pie bursts open to reveal live birds that flutter toward the rafters, making the ladies shriek and the men roar with laughter. There's fish stewed in wine and dotted with cloves and a custard so smooth it slips down your throat like silk. The wine flows like a river red gold, even a strange green one that tastes like flowers and makes your head fuzzy. You sip from a goblet so heavy it could double as a weapon, watching the lord at the head of the table raise his cup, his rings flashing, his voice booming about his latest hunt. This isn't just food. It's a performance, a loud, shiny declaration that he's better than everyone else in this room, and definitely better than the peasants outside, choking down their gritty bread. You're dazzled, but you start to notice the cracks. That swan so pretty on its platter is tough as leather. When you try to eat it, the meat's stringy and cold. The peacock's even worse, dry, gamey, and barely worth the effort of chewing. You wonder why they bothered until you see the guests oohing and ahhing, not at the taste, but at the spectacle. It's not about eating, it's about showing they can afford to roast a bird just for the drama. The spices too are suspicious. The pepper and cinnamon that cost a fortune are slathered on everything, but sometimes you catch a whiff of something off, like the meat's been sitting too long. That fancy sauce. It's hiding rot, masking the fact that the venison's gone a bit grey under the crust. You take a cautious bite and hope your stomach doesn't rebel later. The waste is staggering. Half the food goes untouched, platters of fruit wheels, of cheese loaves of white bread so soft they make you want to cry. The lord's dogs, fat and smug, snap up scraps that would feed your village for a week. Servants whisk away plates before you're done dumping uneaten meat into buckets for the pigs. Or if the rumours are true, to be reworked into tomorrow's new dishes. You see a guest spit out a bite of fish, muttering about a funny taste, and you wonder how much of this feast is a gamble. The spices might hide the rot, but they don't stop the consequences. Last month, half the manor was laid low with gut pains after a feast like this, groaning and sweating through the night. Wealth buys you swan, but it doesn't buy you immunity. You can't help but compare it to your own life out there in the village. You're the one growing the wheat for their bread, tending the pigs for their pork, hauling water for their kitchens. Your hands are rough from the plough, your back aches from the harvest, but you'll never taste this food. Your meals are barley mush or bread so hard it could break a tooth, while here they're tossing out crusts because they're too stale. It's infuriating, but you also see the game. This feast isn't about hunger, it's about power. The Lord serves a whole boar to prove he can, to make every guest feel small next to his wealth. The exotic fruits, the sugar, the spices, they're not just food, they're trophies shouting, "Look how much I have." It's like those modern folks you've heard of posting pictures of their gold-plated steaks or private jets, desperate to prove they're winning at life. The longer you sit, the clearer it gets. This is all a show. The Lord doesn't care if the peacock tastes like old boots. He cares that it makes his rival across the table scowl with envy. The lady next to you, dripping in pearls, picks at her plate not because she's full, but because eating too much looks common. You try to keep up sampling a bit of everything, but your stomach's starting to churn. That fish in the clove sauce is sitting funny, and the wine's gone to your head, making the room tilt. You notice others shifting uncomfortably, a knight loosening his belt, a lady fanning herself a little too fast. The feast is gorgeous, but it's also a trap. You're eating history's most extra dinner, and there's a decent chance it'll send you sprinting to the privy before dawn. It's not just the food that's over the top, it's the whole vibe. Minstrels wander the hall singing about the Lord's greatness, their voices drowned out by drunken shouting. A jester tumbles past, nearly knocking over a candle that could burn this whole place down. Servants hover refilling goblets before they're empty, their faces blank even when a guest snaps at them. The tablecloths are stained with wine and grease, but nobody cares. They'll burn them and buy new ones. You hear the Lord boast about his new cook trained in some far-off city, who knows how to make sauces that cost more than your yearly taxes. It's all so much, so loud, so wasteful, and yet you can't look away. You're caught up in the spectacle, even as you realise half this food is a lie. You think about the modern world where people still flex like this. Picture someone staging a perfect dinner party, every dish curated to look like it belongs on a cooking show, all for a quick photo to flaunt online. They're not eating for joy, they're eating for clout, same as the Lord with his swan. Or think of those fancy restaurants where the portions are tiny, the prices are huge, and the menu reads like poetry, but you leave hungry and a little sick. That's this feast, a big shiny production that's more about status than satisfaction. The nobles are the original influencers curating their lives to scream, "We're better than you," even if it means choking down spoiled meat or faking a smile through food poisoning. The twist hits you like a bad bite of peacock. For all their wealth, these nobles aren't eating much better than you, not really. Sure that they've got variety, but the food's just as likely to betray them. That orange might be exotic, but it's half rotten from the journey. The sugar's a flex, but it's gritty, and hides the fact that the pastry's stale. The spices are a fortune, but they're covering up meat that's one day from turning green. You've heard stories of entire banquets ruined by bad fish, or sour wine leaving lords and guests doubled over, cursing their cooks. Money buys you a prettier plate, but it doesn't save you from a night of regret. In a way, you're all in the same boat, nobles and peasants alike rolling the dice with every bite, hoping the food doesn't fight back. As the feast winds down, the hall grows rowdier. A knight starts a drinking game, splashing wine on the table. The Lord calls for more music, louder to drown out the complaints about the tough swan. You push your plate away, your stomach uneasy, and sip your water instead of the wine. You're surrounded by wealth, by food you'll never see again, but you're starting to miss your simple hut, your hard bread, your quiet nights. At least there you know what you're getting, a meal that's honest, even if it's awful. Here it's all glitter, and lies a feast that's as likely to kill you as impress you. You slip out of the hall, the cool night air, a relief, and head home wondering if the nobles are eating like kings or just pretending to for the sake of everyone watching. Why were slaves fed like they weren't even human? The sun beats down on your back, relentless, as you drag a heavy hoe through the rocky soil, each swing sending jolts of pain through your aching arms. Your bare feet, cracked and caked with mud, stumble over clods of earth. The air smells of dust and sweat, and your throat is so dry it feels like swallowing sand. You're a slave bound to this field, this manner, this life, and hunger is your constant companion, gnawing at your insides like a cruel master. Somewhere nearby, the Lord's house looms, its chimneys puffing smoke that carries the faint, maddening scent of roasting meat. But for you, there's no feast, no table, no relief. Your next meal, if it comes at all, will be a bowl of something barely fit for pigs, and you'll be grateful for it, because it means you might live another day. Your day started before dawn, hauled from a damp, straw-strewn shed, where you sleep crammed alongside others, your bodies pressed together for warmth against the night's chill. No breakfast, just a barked order to get to the fields. You work until your vision blurs, planting, weeding, harvesting crops you'll never taste. Wheat, barley, carrots, cabbages, all of it grows under your hands, but it's for the Lord, the church, the market. Your food when it's given is whatever's left after everyone else takes their share. Most days it's gruel, a watery sludge of barley or oats boiled, until it's a grey, gluey mess. You scoop it from a communal trough with your hands, no spoon, no bowl, just your filthy fingers. It's cold, gritty, and tastes like despair with bits of chaff or mold floating in it. You swallow fast, trying not to gag, because if you don't eat, you won't have the strength to lift that hoe tomorrow. On a good day, you might get scraps, actual scraps like the heel of a loaf too stale for the Lord's dogs, or a cabbage core brown and slimy tossed from the kitchen. Sometimes there's a rind of cheese hard as stone and speckled with green fuzz, or a strip of fat from a pig, rancid and chewy. You eat it anyway, crouching in the dirt, your stomach twisting as it decides whether to accept or reject this offering. The overseer watches his whip coiled, ready to crack if you linger too long. You've learned to eat fast to hide your food from the others, because hunger makes thieves of everyone. Once you got a piece of fish half rotten and reeking of the river, but it was the best thing you'd tasted in months. You savoured every bony bite, even as it left you queasy for hours. This isn't food meant to nourish. It's food meant to keep you moving, a machine that mustn't break down. Your body shows the cost. Your teeth ache some loose from chewing gritty mush, or cracking on pebbles mixed in with the grain. Your skin is sallow, your arms thin, your legs wobbly from years of too little to eat. You see it in the others, too. Hollow eyes, swollen bellies, children who look older than they are. Sickness is a constant shadow sweeping through the sheds like a storm. A bad batch of gruel tainted with mould, or worse, can leave half your group doubled over vomiting or shaking with fever. Nobody cares. The Lord needs his fields worked, not his slaves coddled. If you collapse, they'll drag you away and replace you with another body. You're not human to them. You're a tool fed just enough to keep swinging. You think about the peasants in the village, and even their lives seem like a dream. They're poor, sure, eating their hard bread and thin soups, but they have huts, families, a fire to cook over. You have nothing, no home, no kin, no choices. Their leftovers would be a banquet for you, but even those are rare. The kitchen maids sometimes sneak you a bone or a crust, risking a beating if they're caught, but it's not enough. You've heard of other estates where slaves get nothing at all, left to scavenge or starve. At least here there's the gruel, vile as it is. You cling to that thought because it's all you have to keep the darkness at bay. The fields are your only chance at something better, but it's a deadly game. You work among rows of carrots, turnips and peas, their colours vivid against the brown earth. Your mouth waters as you pull a carrot from the soil, its orange flesh bright and crisp. You glance around, no overseer, no guards. Your heart pounds as you snap off a piece and shove it in your mouth, chewing fast, the sweet crunch almost painful after months of mush. It's heaven, but it's also a death sentence. If they catch you, it's the whip or worse. You've seen it happen, a boy barely 10 lashed until he couldn't stand, all for a handful of peas. Another man older was hanged for stealing an apple from the orchard. You weigh the risk every day, your hunger battling your fear. Sometimes you slip a radish or a leaf of cabbage under your ragged tunic, eating it in the dark of the shed, your hands shaking. Desperation is your seasoning, making every stolen bite taste like freedom. You've heard whispers of slaves who ran, who slipped into the forest and lived off berries and roots. You dream of it, but the reality is grim. The woods are cold, the food scarce, and the Lord's men hunt runaways with dogs. Most who flee are dragged back, broken or dead. You stay because staying means gruel, and gruel means survival. You hate yourself for it, for accepting this half-life. But what else can you do? You're trapped, body and soul, your hunger a chain heavier than any iron. If you squint, your life echoes in the modern world. Think of a prison where food is a cost to be cut, not a right. Trays of watery stew bread, like cardboard meat that's more gristle than protein. It's not about health, it's about keeping bodies upright. Or picture a budget airline, the kind that charges for water and leaves you starving on a 10-hour flight. Except for you, it's not a flight, it's your entire existence. The world moves on indifferent, while you scrape by on the bare minimum. The difference is today, there are rules inspectors, people who might care. Back then there was nothing. You were less than the livestock fed only because a dead slave can't work. The twist is in the theft, the quiet rebellion that keeps you going. You're not supposed to eat the Lord's crops, but you do, because hunger is louder than fear. That carrot, that radish, that single stolen pea, they're not just food, they're defiance. You risk everything for a taste, knowing the cost could be your life. You hide your theft in the shadows, sharing a glance with another slave who's done the same, a silent pact. It's not much, but it's yours, a spark of humanity they can't take. You chew slowly, savouring the forbidden crunch, and for a moment you're more than a tool. You're a person fighting to survive, to taste something real, to remember what it means to be alive. At night in the shed, you lie on the straw, your stomach still rumbling, despite the gruel. The others breathe heavily around you, some whimpering in their sleep. You stare at the dark, thinking of the fields, the carrots, the risk. Tomorrow you'll work again, eat again, steal again if you're lucky. You'll keep going because that's all you know. The gruel will be there sour and thin, and you'll force it down because it's life, however cruel. You close your eyes, dreaming of a day when food isn't a weapon, when you can eat without fear. It's a faint hope, but it's enough to carry you to morning. Did medieval women cook, starve, or both? The fire crackles in the dim, smoky hut, its heat scorching your face as you lean over a bubbling pot. Your hands, rough from years of scrubbing, chopping and kneading, stir the thin gruel with a wooden spoon, worn smooth by countless meals. The air is thick with the sour smell of boiling barley and the faint tang of damp straw from the floor. Your back aches, your feet throb from standing since dawn, and your stomach twists with a hunger that's become as familiar as your own shadow. You're a medieval woman tethered to this kitchen, this family, this village. And your day is an endless cycle of cooking, cleaning and serving, only to eat last if there's anything left. The pot simmers, but it's not for you. It's for your husband, your sons, the men who'll eat first while you wait silent, hoping for a scrap. Your morning began in the dark before the roosters stirred. You hauled water from the stream, the bucket heavy enough to make your shoulders scream, your breath clouding in the chilly air. You gathered sticks for the fire, ignoring the splinters that dug into your palms. Now hours later you're still at it, grinding grain with a stone quern until your arms burn, kneading dough for bread that'll be hard as stone by supper, chopping turnips so wilted they're more grey than white. The meal you're making isn't fancy gruel. Thickened with oats, a few sad vegetables, maybe a rind of bacon if the pantry's generous. It's not enough to feed 6 mouths, but it's all you have and you stretch it with tricks you've learnt over years. More water, a handful of wild herbs, a prayer that no one notices how thin it is. You move fast because there's no time to rest. The kids are underfoot, the youngest tugging at your skirt, whining for a crust. You shush her, promising a bite later, but you know later might mean nothing. Your husband's out in the fields ploughing or hauling grain to the Lord's manor, and when he stomps in muddy and sour, he'll expect food on the table. He'll eat first, taking the biggest share, the choicest bits, the bacon, the bread's soft centre. Your sons, gangly and always hungry, will grab what's next, leaving you and the girls to pick over the dregs, the gruel's watery bottom, the bread's burnt crust, a turnip, end too tough to chew. You'll smile, urge the kids to eat, and ignore the hollow ache in your gut. This is how it is, men first, then boys, then maybe you if the pot isn't scraped clean. It's not just your family. The whole village runs this way, a rule as old as the hills. Men work the fields so they get the strength, the food, the right to eat. Women work too, cooking, washing, tending animals, raising kids, but that's invisible, expected, unpaid. You see it at every meal, every gathering. At the Lord's harvest feast, the men carve up the roast, while the women serve their plates empty until the end. Even the church preaches it. Men are the head women, the hands meant to labour and sacrifice. You've heard widows talk their voices low about going days without eating to keep their sons fed. You're not there yet, but some nights when the pot's near empty, you skip your share saying you're not hungry. Your daughter watches learning, and it breaks your heart. The food itself is a battle. You coax life from what little you have, but it's never enough. The barley's often mouldy, the vegetables bruise the bacon so salty it stings your tongue. You bake bread daily, your hands dusted with coarse flour, but it's heavy, gritty, and goes stale fast. You've mastered small magics, adding nettles for bulk, boiling bones for broth, but there's no joy in it. The Lord takes the best grain the church demands its tithe, and the miller charges to grind what's left. You're cooking with scraps, feeding a family on air and willpower. When the harvest fails, or the pantry runs dry, you forage wild garlic, dandelions, anything to fill the pot. You've eaten things you'd rather forget, soup made from grass bread, bulked with sawdust, a rat's carcass, once when the kids were crying and you had nothing else. You're not alone in this. Across the village, women like you toil in their huts, swapping secrets over the washing stream. Agnes, the miller's wife, showed you how to hide weevils in the flour by toasting the dough. Marjorie, the alewife, trades you a sprig of thyme for a loaf, whispering about a root that eases hunger pangs. You laugh together because it's better than crying. But there's a weight to it, a shared understanding that you're all running on fumes, giving everything to others and saving nothing for yourselves. You see it in their faces, pale, tired, older than their years. You catch your reflection in the stream sometimes, and it's a stranger staring back, hollow-cheeked and worn. It's not so different from today in some ways. You think of modern houses where women still do the cooking, the cleaning, the caring, and eat last if at all. Picture a mum skipping dinner to stretch the groceries, or a wife hosting a party slaving over the stove, only to watch everyone else eat while she clears plates. It's quieter now, less blatant, but the vibe's the same: women as givers, men as takers, the work unseen, the hunger ignored. You're not hosting a party though, you're fighting to keep your family alive, and there's no applause, no Instagram post to show off your sacrifice. Just another day, another pot, another empty stomach. The twist comes in the shadows, the quiet rebellion you don't speak of. You've heard the stories passed in whispers when the men aren't listening. A woman in the next village, fed up with her husband's fists, stirred something extra into his stew, a pinch of herbs from the forest, not thyme or parsley, but something darker gathered under moonlight. He slept for days or so, they say, and she ate first for once. Another tale from years back of a cook in the Lord's kitchen who slipped a bitter root into the soup after a beating. The whole manor was sick, and she was gone by morning, vanished into the woods. You don't know if it's true, but you understand. You felt that spark stirring the pot, your anger simmering with the gruel. You know the plants yarrow for wounds, foxglove for a racing heart, and others whispered about that can quiet a man's temper for good. You've never done it, but you've thought about it, your hand hovering over the pot, weighing the risk. It's not about hate, it's about survival, a way to take back a sliver of power in a world that gives you none. You don't talk about it, not openly. The church would call it sin, the men would call it treason, and the punishment whipfire. Or worse, looms large, but you share a look with Agnes sometimes, or Marjorie, and you know they've thought it too. It's your secret, your defiance tucked away like the herbs in your apron. Most days you just cook, serve and starve because that's safer, because your kids need you, because rebellion doesn't fill bellies. But the thought is there, a tiny flame keeping you warm when the hunger bites. The fire's dying now, the gruel nearly gone. Your husband's home, his boots leaving mud on the floor you swept. He eats, grumbling about the taste, and your sons dive in, leaving a spoonful for you and the girls. You split it, giving them the bigger share, and chew the crust you hid earlier. It's grit familiar. It's weight not enough. You clean the pot bank, the fire, and lie down on your straw mat, the kids breathing soft beside you. Tomorrow you'll do it again. Cook, serve, wait hunger. But you'll also watch, listen, and maybe, just maybe, keep a sprig of something special in your pocket for a day when you've had enough. Was medieval water basically poison? The midday sun hangs heavy over the village, and your throat feels like it's lined with dust after hours of hauling grain sacks to the Lord's barn. Sweat trickles down your back, soaking your rough tunic, and all you want is a drink to wash away the grit in your mouth. You stumble toward the stream that cuts through the village, its surface glinting in the light, promising relief. But as you kneel on the muddy bank, the smell hits you, a sour, rotten stench like something died upstream. The water's murky, flecked with bits of who knows what, and you hesitate, your chipped wooden cup hovering. You're a peasant, and this stream is your lifeline. But every sip feels like a dare. One wrong gulp and your guts could turn against you, leaving you doubled over, praying for mercy. Water is everywhere, but it's rarely your friend. The stream you're staring at isn't just for drinking, it's the village's everything. Upstream women scrub laundry, their soap suds swirling into the current. Downstream the tanner soaks, hides the water, turning a sickly brown from animal blood. And worse, cows and pigs wade in, leaving their mess behind, and the latrine's shallow pits, dug too close to the bank, leak their contents when it rains. You've seen things floating in this water, bits of straw, clumps of filth, once a dead rat bobbing like a grim raft. You try to scoop from the clearer patches, but clear doesn't mean clean. Every cup is a gamble, a roll of the dice that could end with you sweating and shaking your insides, rebelling for days. You've learnt this the hard way. Last summer, after a heavy rain churned the stream into a muddy soup, you drank anyway, desperate to cool off. By nightfall, you were curled up on the dirt floor of your hut, clutching your stomach as it twisted like a wrung cloth. You retched until there was nothing left, your body burning, your head spinning. The village healer, an old woman with a sharp tongue, muttered about bad water and gave you a bitter herb tea that didn't help much. You survived, but others didn't. A neighbour's child too small to fight, it was gone in days. Dysentery, flux, the bloody sickness, whatever you call it. It's the stream's revenge, and it's never far away. So you turn to ale like everyone else. It's not fancy, not the spiced wine the Lord swills at his feasts, but it's safer than water. The alewife down the lane brews it in her hut, boiling barley and herbs in a big cauldron, and the heat kills whatever makes the stream so deadly. It's weak, cloudy, and tastes like sour bread. But it doesn't make you sick, and that's enough. You drink it morning to night ale with your gritty porridge ale, while you work the fields ale to wash down your stale bread at supper. Even the kids sip it their small hands, clutching mugs of the stuff because giving them water is too risky. It's not about getting drunk, it's about staying alive. The ale's low in alcohol, just enough to keep you steady, but by evening your head's a little fuzzy and you're not sure if it's the drink or the hunger. Wine's another option, but it's rare for you. The church keeps barrels for their rituals, and the Lord's Manor has casks of red and gold shipped from far-off lands. You've tasted it once when a kitchen maid slipped you a sip from a cracked jug, sharp sweet like liquid fire. But wine's for the rich, not for you. You stick to ale brewed cheap and local because it's what you can afford. The alewife's your hero, her hut's a sanctuary where you trade a handful of grain or a mended basket for a jug. She jokes that her ale's the only thing keeping the village upright, and she's not wrong. Without it, you'd all be chancing the stream, and the graveyard's full enough already. You've heard about the nobles and their water, and it makes your blood boil. Up at the manor, they don't drink from streams. They've got wells deep and lined with stone, pulling up water that's cleaner than anything you'll ever taste. Some even filter it, pouring it through charcoal or cloth, a luxury you can't fathom. But here's the kicker, they barely drink it. Water's for washing their fancy plates or mixing their paints, not for sipping. They guzzle wine instead, not because it's safer, but because it's a flex. A goblet of wine sparkling in the candlelight says, "I'm rich enough to drink this every day." Meanwhile, you're praying your ale doesn't run dry because the stream's waiting, and it's not kind. The village isn't alone in this mess. You've heard travellers talk about cities where rivers are even worse, choked with sewage, tannery waste, and the runoff from slaughterhouses. Out here, it's just your village's filth, but it's enough to make every drink a risk. You've tried other sources, rainwater caught in a barrel, or a spring a mile away, but they're not much better. The barrel grows slimy if it sits too long, and the spring's muddy half the year. Boiling water helps, but wood's scarce, and you can't afford to burn your cooking fire just for a clean sip. So you stick to ale, and when you must drink water, you hold your breath and hope. It's not so different from some modern nightmares. Picture a town where the pipes are bad, and every glass of water might carry lead or bacteria. People boil it, buy bottles, or get sick just like you. Or think of a grimy public fountain in a rundown park, the kind where the water tastes like rust and you wonder what's living in the pipes. That's your stream, except there's no bottled water, no city council to complain to, no news report to warn you. You drink, you pray, you live, or you don't. The world doesn't care, and the Lord's not digging you a well. The twist is in the nobles' hypocrisy. They've got their clean wells, their filtered jugs, but they choose wine to show off while you're stuck with no choice at all. You've seen their feasts hauling grain to the manor, the tables groaning with casks and goblets. They toast their wealth, their hunts, their power, while you lug your ale jug home hoping it lasts the week. Their water's safe, but it's not enough. They need the flex, the shine, the status. You, on the other hand, need survival. Every sip of stream water is a test. Every mug of ale a small victory. You've heard of villages where the stream's so bad they lose half their people in a season. You're still here, still drinking, still dodging the poison. At night you sit by the fire, your kids asleep on the straw, and sip the last of your ale. The stream burbles outside, tempting and treacherous. You think about the manor's wells, the Lord's wine, the unfairness of it all. Tomorrow you'll fetch water again, scoop it carefully, maybe boil it if you can spare the wood. You'll drink ale when you can, water when you must, and keep going, because that's what you do. Your stomach's held strong so far, but every swallow's a risk. A tiny battle in a world where even thirst can kill you. You drain your mug, set it down, and close your eyes, hoping tomorrow's drink doesn't bring the sickness. Why did they think mouldy food was a personality trait? The air in your cramped hut is heavy with the smell of smoke and damp straw, and you're crouched in the dim corner where you keep your food, if you can call it that. Your pantry is a rickety shelf, sagging under the weight of a few clay pots, a sack of barley, and a lump of cheese wrapped in a rag that's seen better days. You're hungry as always, your stomach growling like an angry dog, so you reach for the cheese hoping it's still good. As you unwrap it, the stench hits you, a sharp, sour whiff, like old socks left in the rain. The cheese is speckled with fuzzy green patches, and something small and wriggly darts across its surface. You sigh, grab your knife, and start scraping, because this is supper, and tossing it out isn't an option. In your village, mould isn't a deal breaker. It's just part of the meal, like salt or grit. Keeping food edible is a constant battle, and you're losing. Winter's coming, and the harvest is already thinning, so every scrap counts. You've got no ice, no fancy jars, just a dirt floor and a hut that leaks when it rains. Your barley sack sits in the damp, sprouting tiny white threads if you don't turn it often. The bread you baked last week is hard as a rock with a suspicious grey fuzz creeping across the crust. Even the apples you foraged are turning soft and brown, their skins wrinkling like old faces. You try to preserve what you can, salting meat when you get it, drying herbs over the fire, boiling fruit into a sticky paste. But it's a race against rot. The air's too wet, the bugs too persistent, and your storage is a joke. Maggots show up like uninvited guests squirming in your grain or burrowing into a slab of bacon you traded half a day's work for. You've learned to deal with it because hunger doesn't care about perfection. That cheese you carve off the mouldy bits, ignoring the faint bitter taste that lingers, and chew the rest, hoping it doesn't upset your stomach. The bread's furry edge gets sliced away, and you toast the rest over the fire to mask the staleness. If you find weevils in your porridge, you skim them out, or if you're too tired, you just eat them. Their tiny crunch barely noticeable after years of gritty meals. Waste is a luxury you can't afford. Every bite is hard-won, grown in fields you ploughed ground with your own hands, cooked over a fire you tended. Throwing food away feels like throwing away a piece of yourself, so you salvage what you can and pray it doesn't fight back. It's not just you, everyone in the village plays this game. Your neighbour old Tom brags about eating a sausage so green it glowed, swearing it added character. The alewife laughs about her barley stew, which she keeps eating even when it smells like a swamp, claiming it's just fermentation. You all share tricks. Soak mouldy bread in ale to soften it, boil spoiled vegetables to kill the funk rub, cheese with salt to slow the rot. It's a strange kind of pride, this ability to stomach what others might gag at. You've seen the Lord's kitchen maids toss out whole loaves for a single spot of mould, and it makes your blood boil. They don't know what it's like to count every crumb, to stretch a sack of grain across a month, to eat what the bugs left behind because there's nothing else. Sometimes, though, the food bites back. Last spring you ate a chunk of rye bread that tasted off sharp and tingling on your tongue. By evening your head was spinning, and the world felt wrong colours, too bright, shadows dancing like they were alive. You stumbled outside, convinced the stars were singing, your heart racing until you collapsed in the grass. The next day you were fine, just shaky, but you heard stories of others who weren't so lucky. A man in the next village ate bad rye and saw demons clawing at his own skin until he bled. The healer called it holy fire, blaming bad grain. Maybe a mould that grows on damp rye and plays tricks on your mind. You're more careful now, checking your bread for black spots, but you still eat what you have. Starving's a worse fate than a weird night. You think about the modern world where people panic over a yogurt past its use by date or a tomato with a soft spot. They'd take one look at your cheese crawling with life and run screaming. You get it, nobody wants to get sick, but you don't have the luxury of a fridge or a grocery store. Your food's a gamble, like eating that sketchy yogurt 3 weeks late because your wallet's empty and it's all you've got. The difference is you don't get a choice. There's no market to pop into, no trash bin for expired goods. You eat the cheese, the bread, the stew mould, and all because hunger's louder than caution and survival's the only rule. The twist is in those strange moulds, the ones that don't just sour your food, but mess with your head. You've heard whispers about them. Rye moulds, cheese moulds, even wine gone bad, that send people on wild rides. A woman in the village swears she saw angels after eating a mouldy loaf, her voice soft with awe. Another man less lucky spent a day shouting at trees before he passed out. It's not something you seek out, not like the Lord's wine or the healer's herbs, but it happens, an accidental trip that comes with the territory. You don't chase the visions, they're as likely to terrify as to delight, but when they hit, they're a break from the grind, a fleeting escape from a world where every meal's a fight. You're not proud of eating rot, but you're not ashamed either. It's just life, as normal as the rain or the plough. You sit by the fire tonight, slicing the green off a wedge of cheese, your kids watching hungrily. You hand them the clean parts, saving the worst for yourself because that's what you do. The bread's hard, the stew's got a funny smell, but you eat chewing slowly, ignoring the faint tang of mould. You've survived worse, bad harvests, bad winters, bad everything. You'll survive this too, bugs and all, because wasting food isn't just foolish, it's suicide. You wipe your knife, bank the fire, and settle onto your straw mat, your stomach full enough to carry you to morning. Mould's not your friend, but it's not your enemy either. It's just another guest at the table, and you've learned to live with it. Did spices cost more than your life? The great hall sparkles under the flicker of 100 candles, their light bouncing off silver goblets, and the jewelled rings of the lords and ladies around you. The air is thick with scents that make your head spin. Roasted meat, fresh baked bread, and something sharper, richer like a secret only the wealthy can afford. A servant sets a platter before you, a slab of venison glistening under a dark, fragrant sauce. You lean closer, and the smell hits pepper, bold and biting with a hint of something sweeter, maybe cinnamon. The lord at the head of the table raises his goblet, smirking, as he boasts about the spices in tonight's feast, each pinch worth more than your entire village. You're a guest in this world of excess, where a sprinkle of saffron could buy your life, and every bite is a loud, shiny flex. You take a cautious bite of the venison, and the pepper explodes on your tongue, sharp and warm. Nothing like the bland gruel you're used to. It's thrilling, but you know this isn't just food, it's power. Spices like pepper, saffron, and cinnamon aren't grown in the muddy fields outside. They come from far-off lands carried across deserts and seas by traders who risk bandit storms and pirates. Every grain of pepper on your plate has travelled farther than you'll ever go, packed in silk bags guarded like gold. The cost is staggering. A single pound of saffron could buy a horse, a house, or a year's worth of grain. Cinnamon's no cheaper, its sweet, woody heat, a luxury only the richest can toss into their stew. Even pepper, the common spice, costs more than your yearly wages if you had any. You're eating money and the Lord wants everyone to know it. The table is a showcase of this wealth. There's a swan roasted and dressed in its own feathers, its sauce glittering with cloves. A pie bursts open, spilling custard laced with nutmeg, the scent so heady it makes you dizzy. The bread, white and soft as a cloud, is studded with tiny flecks of something golden saffron, the Lord's favourite brag, each thread plucked from a flower more delicate than his ego. The wine's spiked with ginger, burning your throat in a way that feels like privilege. Every dish screams, "I can afford this," while the peasants outside choke down barley mush that tastes like regret. You glance at the Lord's wife, her silk gown shimmering, and realise her dress is worth less than the spices in her soup. This isn't dining. It's a performance, a way to make every guest feel small next to the host's fortune. You're dazzled, but you start to notice the game behind the glamour. The spices aren't just about taste. They're a class marker, a line between the haves and the have-nots. In your village, food is survival flavoured, with nothing but salt if you're lucky, or wild herbs you foraged from the ditch. Bland is your birthright, a sign you're nobody. Up here in the manor, blandness is a sin, a shame only the poor endure. The Lord doesn't eat pepper because he loves it. He eats it because you can't. His guests, all nobles themselves, nod and praise the cinnamon, but you catch their eyes darting, calculating who's flexing harder. It's a contest and the spices are the score. You take another bite, wondering how many fields were sold to pay for this sauce, how many peasants starved so the Lord could prove a point. It's not so different from today's world where people chase status through stuff. Picture someone dropping a fortune on a designer watch, not because it tells time better, but because it screams, "I'm rich." Or imagine a date where you blow your budget on a fancy dinner, sprinkling truffle salt on your fries to impress someone you met online. That's the Lord with his saffron, except his flex could bankrupt a village. You've heard of modern chefs charging hundreds for a plate dusted with rare spices, and it's the same vibe, paying for the brag, not the flavour. The nobles are the original influencers curating their feasts to make everyone else feel like they're missing out. Their tables, a medieval version of a perfectly staged social media post. But here's the twist, the dirty secret that makes you stifle a laugh. Not every spice on this table is real. You overhear a servant whisper about the saffron, how the merchant swore it was pure, but it looked a little too coarse, a little too cheap. You've heard the stories, traders mixing dirt with pepper, dyeing sawdust to pass as cinnamon, selling ground weeds as saffron to gullible lords. Even the rich get scammed, their precious spices cut with junk to stretch the profit. You take another sip of the ginger wine and now you're wondering, is that gritty aftertaste the real deal? Or did someone in a far-off market laugh as they sold the Lord a barrel of flavoured mud? The nobles don't seem to notice, too busy praising the cloves, but you catch a guest grimace, spitting a bit of saffron into his napkin. Money buys you a lot, but it doesn't buy you a good nose. The feast rolls on, louder and messier. A knight boasts about his own spice stash, claiming his cook uses more nutmeg than the Lord's. A lady fans herself, complaining the pepper's too strong, but she eats it anyway because admitting weakness is worse than a burning tongue. Servants dart around, refilling goblets, their faces blank even as they dodge drunken elbows. The tablecloths are stained with wine and grease, the floor littered with bones the dogs haven't claimed. You push your plate away, overwhelmed by the richness, the waste, the sheer audacity of it all. You've tasted things you'll never afford again, but you're starting to see the cracks. The spices are a dream, but they're also a lie as likely to be fake as they are to bankrupt the host. You think about your own life back in the village. Your food is plain bread gruel, a turnip if you're lucky, but it's honest. You know exactly what's in your bowl because you grew it, ground it, cooked it. Here the nobles are eating illusions, spices that might be dirt sauces hiding meat that's gone off. You've heard of feasts where the spices didn't just cost a fortune, but covered up rot, leaving whole tables sick by morning. Your gruel won't win any prizes, but it won't send you to the privy for a week. You sip your water risky, but you're too full for more wine and feel a strange pride. You're poor, but you're not foolish enough to trade your hut for a pinch of maybe saffron. As the night winds down, the Lord calls for more wine, his voice slurring his spice-fueled ego in full bloom. The guests cheer their faces, flush their plates piled with half-eaten proofs of wealth. You slip out of the hall, the cool night air, a relief after the stuffy, scented chaos. The stars are bright, the village quiet, and you head home your stomach full, but your mind buzzing. Spices are the ultimate flex, worth more than your life, but they're also a trap, fake, fleeting, and not worth the cost. You'll stick to your bland mush, thank you very much, and leave the lords to their expensive dirt. Why was fasting a flex and a curse? The cold dawn seeps into your hut, chilling your bones as you huddle on a lumpy straw mat, your stomach already rumbling like a distant storm. It's Friday, a fasting day, and the church's rules hang over you like a heavy fog. No meat, no fat, no rich foods, just bread gruel, maybe a sad turnip if you're lucky. You're a peasant and hunger is your old friend, but today it's sharper sanctioned by God and enforced by the priest's stern sermons. You shuffle to the fire, coaxing embers to life with trembling hands, and stir a pot of watery oats, the same grey slop you've eaten all week. Your kids watch their eyes big and hollow, knowing there's no bacon, no cheese, not even a smear of butter. Fasting is supposed to bring you closer to heaven, but right now it feels like a punishment, and you're not sure what you did to deserve it. The church is everywhere, its bells ringing out the days you must abstain, Friday's Lent Advent, and a dozen other holy times that add up to half the year. Meat's forbidden, along with anything that makes food worth eating: milk, eggs, butter, anything that tastes of comfort. The priest says it's for your soul, a way to tame your sinful body and honour God's sacrifice. You nod in church, your head bowed, but your stomach doesn't care about sermons. You're already eating less than you need, stretching every grain to feed your family. Fasting doesn't feel like a choice. It's a command carved into the rhythm of your life. You've seen the priest's men sniff around the village, checking pots for forbidden broth, ready to fine or shame anyone who breaks the rules. So you obey because defiance costs more than hunger. Your meal today is a crust of barley bread, so hard it hurts your jaw, and a bowl of gruel that's more water than oats. You've added a sprig of wild parsley scavenged from the ditch to pretend it's a meal, but it's not fooling anyone. Your husband grumbles, tearing into the bread, while your daughter picks at her share, too young to understand why there's no milk. You take the smallest portion, sipping the gruel slowly to make it last, but it's gone too fast, leaving your gut as empty as before. You're dizzy, your hands shaky as you scrub the pot, but there's work to do: fields to weed, clothes to mend, a life to keep going. Fasting isn't just hunger, it's exhaustion, a weight that drags you down while the church calls it virtue. You think about the nobles up at the manor, and it stings. For them, fasting is a game, a way to show off their piety like they show off their spices. They've got pantries stuffed with dried fish, almonds, and fancy fruits from across the sea. Their fast means swapping roasted boar for poached salmon, or nibbling on honeyed figs instead of custard. You've seen it hauling grain to their kitchen tables set with foods you'll never taste, all within the church's rules but far from suffering. The Lord boasts about his Lenten feasts, how he abstains for God, but his belly's full, his cheeks ruddy. Fasting for him is a flex, a chance to prove he's holy without missing a meal. You meanwhile are counting crumbs, praying the kids don't cry for more. The church's grip is tight, but it's not just about food. Fasting is a performance, a way to show you're good, obedient, worthy of grace. The priest watches from his pulpit, tallying who skips meat and who sneaks a sausage. The nobles watch each other, competing to see who can fast most extravagantly, their tables a mockery of sacrifice. Even the monks cloistered in their stone walls make a show of it, their prayers loud and their plates suspiciously full. You've heard rumours about them whispered in the village, how they bend the rules with clever tricks. They eat barnacle geese, strange birds from the coast, that supposedly grow on trees like fruit, not counted as meat because they're fish. You're not sure if it's true, but it sounds like a loophole only the learned could dream up a way to keep their stomachs happy while the rest of you starve for salvation. You've tried to find your own loopholes, small ones that don't risk the priest's wrath. You boil nettles into a thin soup, calling it penance to make it feel holy. You chew on a sprig of mint to trick your hunger, or give the kids extra bread on fasting days hoping God won't mind. But there's no escaping the emptiness, the way it seeps into your bones, making every step heavier. You've seen what fasting does to the weakest old widow Joan who fainted in church last Lent, or the smith's boy who got so thin he couldn't lift a hammer. You're stronger, you tell yourself, but some days you're not sure. Your hands shake as you weave, your vision blurs, and you wonder if God really wants you this weak, this worn. It's not so different from today's world, where people chase diets for reasons beyond health. Picture someone doing a juice cleanse, not because they love kale, but because it's trendy, because their friends or their boss expect it. They post their green smoothies online, bragging about discipline while you're fasting, because the church says your soul depends on it. Or think of those wellness gurus preaching starvation as purity, guilting people into skipping meals for a better body or mind. The vibe's the same: sacrifice as status hunger, as proof you're doing it right. But you don't have a choice, no app to track your fast, no fridge to raid when you cave. You're starving for God, for the village, for a system that doesn't care if you collapse. The twist with the monks and their barnacle geese sticks with you, a spark of human cunning in a world of rules. You picture them robed and solemn, carving up their not quite birds, their faces straight but their stomachs grateful. It's absurd, but it's also clever, a way to game the system without breaking it. You've done it too in your own way, slipping a bit of fish broth into the gruel and calling it plain, or eating a fallen apple and pretending it's not food. These tiny rebellions keep you sane, a reminder that you're human, not just a pawn in the church's plan. You don't laugh about it openly. The priest's ears are sharp and the fines are steep. But you share a knowing glance with your neighbour who's boiled her own holy weeds, and it's enough to keep you going. The day drags on, the fasting hours stretching like a lifetime. You work through the dizziness, mending a torn tunic, hauling water, shushing the kids when they beg for more. By evening, the church bell rings, signalling the end of the fast, but there's no feast waiting. Just another bowl of gruel, a crust of bread, the same hunger dressed up as dinner. You eat slowly, savouring the blandness because it's all you have. The nobles are probably dining on their pious fish, the monks on their clever geese, while you're here scraping the pot. Your soul no cleaner, but your body weaker. Fasting is a flex for them, a curse for you, and you're not sure which is worse, the hunger or the unfairness. You lie down at night, the straw scratching your back, the kids breathing soft beside you. Your stomach's still growling, but you're used to it, a lullaby of want. Tomorrow's not a fasting day, so there might be a bit of fat in the pot, a sliver of hope. You think about the monks, their geese, their loopholes, and smile faintly. Maybe you'll find your own miracle, a way to bend the rules without breaking. For now you close your eyes, dreaming of a world where food isn't a test, where hunger isn't holy, where you can eat until you're full. Were medieval kitchens a death trap? The heat hits you like a fist as you step into the manor's kitchen, a cramped, smoky cave where the air feels alive with danger. Flames roar in the open hearth, licking at the blackened beams overhead, and the room is choked with a haze so thick it stings your eyes. You're a cook, one of the women tasked with feeding the Lord's household, and this is your battlefield. Your hands, scarred from burns and nicks, grip a heavy iron pot as you stir, a bubbling stew dodging sparks that leap from the fire. The floor is slick with grease and spilled broth, the walls slick with soot, and every breath tastes like ash. Somewhere behind you, a girl coughs, her face half hidden in the smoke, while another servant hauls a basket of turnips through the chaos. One wrong move, a slipped pot, a stray ember, and this whole place could go up in flames, taking you with it. The kitchen is a nightmare of heat and clutter, barely big enough for the work it demands. The hearth dominates one wall, a gaping maw of fire, fed by logs you drag in yourself, your arms aching from the weight. Above it, pots hang on chains, swaying dangerously as the flames surge. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof that lets out some smoke and lets in rain when the weather turns. The rest of the smoke swirls around you, coating your throat, making your lungs burn. A rickety table groans under piles of vegetables, flour sacks, and a half-plucked goose, its feathers sticking to your sweaty arms. Knives, dull and rusted, lie scattered among the mess, and a cracked clay jug of ale teeters on the edge, threatening to crash. There's no space to move, no air to breathe, just you and the other women shouting over the fire's roar, trying to keep up with the Lord's endless demands. You're cooking for dozens, lords, ladies, guests, and the manor's sprawling staff. And every meal is a race against time. The Lord wants his venison roasted, his bread fresh, his custard smooth. And he wants it now. You chop, stir, and knead your hands, moving on instinct, even as sweat drips into your eyes. The fire's your only tool, but it's a traitor. 1 minute it's too weak, barely warming the pot. The next it's flaring up, singeing your apron, or catching a stray rag. Last month a spark hit the straw on the floor, and you barely stamped it out before it spread. You've seen what happens when a kitchen fire gets loose. Whole villages burned, families gone, just because someone turned their back for a second. You're careful, but careful isn't enough when the whole room's a tinderbox. The work is relentless and the risks are everywhere. You've got burns on your forearms, red and raw from brushing against the hearth. Your fingers are nicked from slicing onions with a knife that slips on the greasy table. The smoke's the worst, though, seeping into your chest, making every breath a struggle. You cough constantly, a dry hacking sound that matches the other women's. Some days you're so dizzy you have to grip the table to stay upright, the world tilting as your lungs beg for clean air. You've heard of cooks who didn't make it, women like you, who worked one shift too many, their bodies giving out from the smoke collapsing by the hearth, while the nobles upstairs whined about cold soup. The manor doesn't stop for them, and it won't stop for you. You're not alone in this hell. The kitchen is women's work, mostly servants like you, or the Lord's daughters, when they're learning to run a household. There's no training, no safety, just a barked order to keep the food coming. The men haul wood or slaughter pigs, but they steer clear of the fire's heart, leaving you to wrestle with the flames. You've got a girl barely 12 who sweeps the floor and stirs the pots, her hands already calloused, her eyes red from the smoke. You watch her, your heart tight, knowing she's learning this life too young. The noble women visit, sometimes sniffing at your stew or demanding fancier spices, but they don't stay long. They've got no idea what it takes to feed them, no clue about the burns, the coughs, the fear that you'll be the one who sets the manor ablaze. You try to make it safer, but it's a losing fight. You keep a bucket of water by the hearth, though it's more for show than use. Dousing a fire means losing the meal, and the Lord's wrath is worse than a burn. You tie your hair back to keep it from the flames, but your skirts still brush too close, heavy with grease stains that could catch at any moment. You've learnt to move fast, to listen for the fire's crackle to smell when the smoke turns wrong. The other women share tricks. Wet a rag to cover your face, stand sideways to dodge the heat. Pray to St. Lawrence, who was roasted alive and might understand. You laugh about it, sometimes a grim chuckle, over a shared jug of ale, because if you don't laugh, you'll scream. It's not so different from modern kitchen mishaps, just 100 times worse. Picture trying to cook a huge holiday meal on a campfire in a closet with no vents and a crowd yelling for their turkey. You've heard of today's chefs slicing fingers or burning hands, but they've got first aid kits, fire extinguishers, and ovens that don't double as death traps. Your kitchen's a war zone with no rules, no backup, no mercy. One slip and you're scarred or worse. You've seen the village healer, her herbs useless against deep burns, her prayers no match for lungs ruined by years of smoke. You're on your own, and the stakes are life and death every single day. The twist is the cruelest part, the thing that makes your stomach twist harder than the hunger. While you're choking on smoke, dodging flames, and praying the roof doesn't catch, the nobles upstairs are fussing about their meal. You've heard them, their voices drifting down when you deliver a tray, complaining the soup's too cold, the bread too tough, the sauce not spicy enough. They've got no idea you're risking your life to feed them, that some cooks never leave this kitchen, their breath stolen by the smoke while the Lord sips his wine. You've lost friends to this work, women who coughed until they couldn't, who fell into the fire or just didn't wake up one morning. The manor moves on, hiring another pair of hands while you keep cooking, keep burning, keep breathing ash. Tonight the Lord's hosting a feast and the kitchen's a frenzy. You're roasting a pig, the spit creaking as you turn it. The flames so close they singe your knuckles. The girl's chopping cabbage, her knife slipping on the wet table. And another woman's kneading dough, her face grey from the smoke. You shout to keep them moving, your voice hoarse, your lungs tight. A spark lands on your sleeve and you slap it out, heart pounding. The stew's bubbling, the bread's baking, and you're one ember away from disaster. You think about the nobles, their silk and jewels, their complaints about cold soup. And you grit your teeth. You'll get this meal out, burns and all, because that's what you do. But as you cough, the smoke curling around you like a noose, you wonder how many more meals you've got left before the kitchen claims you too. Why did they eat animals? We'd call pets. The wind howls outside your hut, rattling the thin walls as you huddle by a sputtering fire, your stomach clawing at itself with hunger. It's been days since the last decent meal, the harvest long gone, the pantry a sad collection of mouldy crumbs and a single shriveled turnip. Your kids are whining their faces pale, and the village is gripped by a famine that's stripped every field bare. You step outside, your breath clouding in the icy air, and spot your dog, a scruffy mutt, who's been trailing you since he was a pup. He wags his tail hopeful for a scrap, but you look at him differently today. Your heart twists, but your hands shake with need as you reach for a knife. In this world, hunger doesn't care about loyalty, and that dog, your companion, your guard, is starting to look like survival. Food is scarce, and desperation has rewritten the rules. You're a peasant scraping by in a village where the crops failed, and the Lord's taxes took what little was left. The usual meals, gruel bread. Maybe a bit of cabbage are gone, replaced by whatever you can find. You've boiled nettles, chewed bark, even tried grass when the pain in your gut got too loud. But it's not enough, and the kids are fading. Their eyes dull, their voices weak. The animals you'd normally spare, the ones that sleep by your fire or chase rats from your grain, are no longer off limits. Last week, your neighbour slaughtered his cat, a skinny thing that used to curl up on his daughter's lap. He didn't talk about it, just shared a watery stew that tasted of guilt and kept you alive another day. You ate it because refusing isn't an option when starvation's knocking. It's not just dogs and cats. When the famine hit hard, you saw people trap rats, their tiny bodies skewered and roasted over a fire, the smell more like burning hair than meat. Birds, squirrels, even hedgehogs. Anything that moves is fair game. You've heard stories from other villages whispered by travellers of worse foxes, badgers, things you'd never touch in a good year. You try not to judge because you've been there staring at a scrawny pigeon and weighing whether it's worth the effort to catch. The hunger's a monster, and it doesn't care about your heart. You've always liked animals. Your dog's warmth got you through cold nights, your cat's purring a small comfort. But when the choice is them or your family, the knife wins. It's not like animals are family here, not the way you've heard some modern folks talk. Your dog's useful, he barks at strangers, keeps the wolves away, but he's not your child. He eats scraps you can't spare, and in lean times that makes him a burden. Cats prowl the grain sacks, earning their keep, but they're not cuddled or named. Animals are tools workers, sometimes food, and nobody's writing poems about their souls. You've seen the Lord's hunting dogs fed better than you, but even they're not pets, they're status like his horses or his falcons. The idea of loving an animal like kin feels strange, a luxury for people who don't know what it's like to count every bite. You care for your mutt, but when the pantry's empty, caring isn't enough. The village is full of these stories told in low voices over shared fires. Old Tom boiled his dog last winter, his hands shaking as he did it. But his kids ate for a week. The alewife swears she ate a rat stew once, claiming it wasn't half bad with enough wild garlic. You laugh because it's easier than crying, but the truth sits heavy. You've done it too, just once, when the famine was at its worst. Your cat, a grey shadow who hunted mice, stopped catching anything too weak to move. You did it quick, your eyes wet, and cooked a broth so thin it barely counted. The kids didn't ask what it was, and you didn't tell them. You all survived, but you still see that cat in your dreams, her green eyes watching. Today's world would lose its mind at this. Picture someone opening their fridge, finding it empty, and eyeing their golden retriever like it's a roast. The outrage would be instant. The internet exploding with hashtags and petitions. People name their dogs, buy them beds, treat them like kids. Your village would seem like a horror show. But flip it around. Imagine their shock if they had to live your life with no grocery store, no safety net, just a knife and a dog, and a hunger that won't quit. It's like eating your vacuum cleaner because you ran out of food, desperate, unthinkable. But you'd do it if it kept you alive. They don't know what it's like to choose between love and survival, to make a call that haunts you but fills an empty belly. The twist is where it gets uglier, because it's not just the poor who eat the unthinkable. Up at the manor, the nobles are dining on animals you'd call beautiful, and they're not even hungry. You've seen it hauling grain to their kitchen, a swan. Its white feathers plucked and roasted, served on a platter like a king's crown. Swans are rare, graceful, the kind of creature you'd stop to watch as it glides across a pond. But the Lord eats them not for need, but for show, to prove he can take something lovely and turn it into dinner. Peacocks too, their dazzling tails fanned out for display before they're carved up, their meat tough but prestigious. You're eating dogs to survive. They're eating swans to flex, and somehow their cruelty feels worse because it's not about hunger, it's about power. You've heard the noblewomen gasp at the sight of a roasted swan, not in horror, but in awe, praising the Lord's wealth. The men slap the table, toasting the hunt that bagged such a prize. Meanwhile, you're in the village whispering apologies to your dog as you sharpen your knife, your kid's hunger louder than your guilt. The nobles don't know that kind of desperation, but they still destroy. For sport, their tables a graveyard of beauty. You hate them for it, but you envy them too. Their pantries are never empty. Their choices never this stark. They eat to impress while you eat to live. And the gap between you feels wider than the sea. Back in your hut, the fire's dying. And you're still staring at the dog. He's asleep now, curled by the hearth, trusting you. You put the knife down, your hands shaking, and dig out the turnip instead. It's not enough, but it'll buy you a day, maybe two, before you have to decide. You slice it thin, boil it with some weeds, and call it supper. Your kids eating in silence. You're not noble, not cruel for show, but you're not soft either. You'll do what it takes to survive, even if it breaks you. For now the dog sleeps and you let him knowing. Tomorrow might not be so kind. Was medieval food fraud a full-time job? The market square buzzes with chaos, a swirl of shouting vendors, bleating goats, and the sharp stink of fish and unwashed bodies. Your worn shoes sink into the muddy ground as you clutch a few precious coins, your stomach growling louder than the crowd. You're here to buy food, something to keep your family fed for another week, but every stall feels like a trap. The butcher's table is piled with glistening slabs of beef, but the meat's a strange greyish hue, and his grin is too wide, like he's hiding something. Next to him, a baker hawks loaves that smell more like sawdust than bread, and the cheesemonger's wares are speckled with green fuzz. He swears is just flavour. You're a peasant, and this market is your lifeline. But every purchase is a gamble, a coin tossed between supper and poison. You weave through the crowd, your eyes sharp, your nose wary. The butcher's calling you over, waving a chunk of meat he claims is fresh from the cow. But you've heard the rumours horse meat passed off as beef, or worse, dog when the butcher's desperate. You squint at the sab. Its texture too stringy, its smell a little too wild. You ask questions, but he laughs, saying you're too picky for a peasant. You move on because last month your neighbour bought pork that made her family sick for days, vomiting and sweating through the night. Nobody checked the butcher, nobody fined him. There are no rules here, no inspectors, just you and your wits against a market full of hustlers who know hunger makes you careless. The baker's stall is no better. His bread looks decent, golden and crusty, but you've been burned before, literally, with loaves so full of grit they chipped a tooth or bulked with sawdust that left your stomach cramping. You pick up a loaf, squeezing it, sniffing for that telltale woody scent. The baker's watching, his hands twitchy, promising it's pure wheat. You doubt it. Wheat's for nobles, and you're stuck with barley or rye, often mixed with chalk or ground beans, to stretch the flour. You've heard of bakers tossing in ash or clay, anything to make the loaf heavier, because weight means money. You buy it anyway because your kids are hungry, but you'll check every slice at home, hoping it's bread and not a carpenter's reject. The cheesemonger's next, his stall, a shrine to mouldy wheels and crumbling wedges. He's got a smooth voice, calling his green-streaked cheese aged to perfection, but you're not fooled. That's not aging, that's rot left too long in a damp cellar. You've eaten bad cheese before, the kind that tastes fine at first but sends you running to the privy by midnight. You haggle, picking the least fuzzy piece, but you're already planning to scrape it clean, maybe boil it into soup to kill whatever's growing. The fishmonger's worse, his trout are dull-eyed, their flesh soft and reeking, but he swears they're fresh from the river. You pass, remembering the time you bought fresh mackerel that left you feverish, your guts in revolt. This isn't a market. It's a battlefield, and you're armed only with suspicion. There's no one to complain to, no laws to protect you. The Lord's men might patrol for thieves, but they don't care if the butcher's selling cat or the alewife's watering her brew. You've heard of markets in bigger towns where guilds set standards. But out here, it's every vendor for themselves. They're not evil. Not all of them just hungry too, scraping by like you cutting corners to feed their own. The butcher's got kids, the baker's got debts, and they know you'll buy what they sell, because starvation's a worse scam than sawdust. You get it, but it doesn't make the meat smell better. You've learnt to be your own inspector. You sniff, poke and prod, ignoring the vendor's glares. You've got tricks, break the bread to check for grit, smell the meat for that sour tang, taste a crumb of cheese before you commit. Your neighbour taught you to rub flour between your fingers. If it's too smooth, it's probably chalk. You share these hacks with the other women, whispering in the square, a quiet rebellion against the market's lies. But even the best tricks fail sometimes. Last year you bought a sausage that looked fine but was stuffed with offal, and fat barely meat at all. You ate it because you'd spent your last coin, but the shame burned hotter than the hunger. It's not so different from today's scam, just messier. Picture ordering organic beef online only to get a package of mystery meat from a shady supplier, no label, no refunds. Or think of a restaurant cutting corners serving cheap fish, as wild-caught salmon banking on you not noticing. Modern folks have agencies, labels, lawsuits to fight back. You've got nothing but your gut and a prayer. The hustle's the same though. Sell, cheap, charge, high hope the buyer's too busy or broke to care. You'd laugh if it weren't your supper on the line, if every coin didn't represent a day's work in the fields, a day you can't get back. The twist is where it gets wild and grim. Some vendors pay for their scams, and not with a fine. You've heard the stories: a butcher in a nearby town caught selling horse as beef, one too many times dragged to the gallows, his body left swinging as a warning. A baker who mixed poison into his flour, not on purpose but from mouldy grain, was banished, his stall burned. The market squares seen blood, the crowd cheering when a cheat's caught, because everyone's been burned by a bad loaf or a rancid chop. But here's the kicker: the nobles keep buying even after the executions. They've got coin to burn, servants to send, and a taste for convenience. They'll grumble about the dodgy saffron or the off-tasting pork, but they don't stop because shopping's easier than starving even for them. You see it at the manor delivering your taxes. The Lord's kitchen buys from the same market, and you've heard the cooks curse a wheel of cheese that's half chalk or a cask of wine that's mostly vinegar. The rich get scammed too, their gold no shield against a clever vendor. But they've got options: spices to mask the rot, new shipments to replace the bad. You don't. Your bad loaf is your only loaf, your sour meat your only meal. You stand in the square, coins gone, a bag of questionable goods in your arms, and head home praying it's food and not a trick. The vendors watch you go, already calling to the next customer, their grins as sharp as their knives. At your hut, you unpack, your whole heart sinking. The bread's heavy, too heavy, maybe sawdust. The meat's got a funny smell, but you'll boil it long and hope. The cheese at least looks edible once you scrape off the green. You light the fire, your kids crowding close, and start cooking, your nose on high alert. The market's a gamble, but you're still here, still eating, still dodging the worst of the frauds. You slice the bread, sniff the stew, and serve it up, because that's life hope. It's not poison hope. It's enough hope. Tomorrow's market is kinder. It probably won't be, but you'll go anyway, coins in hand, ready to fight for your next meal. Why did kids drink beer for breakfast? The morning light barely creeps through the cracks in your hut's walls, and the air is thick with the smell of damp straw and last night's fire. Your bare feet hit the cold dirt floor as you shuffle to the rickety table where your kids are already gathered, their small hands clutching chipped wooden mugs. You pour them ale from a clay jug, its cloudy, sour liquid sloshing into each cup. Your youngest, barely 5, takes a sip, her nose wrinkling at the bitter taste, but she drinks anyway because it's what's on the table. You're a peasant, and in your village, ale isn't a party. It's breakfast, lunch, and dinner for you, your kids, everyone. The stream outside is a gamble laced with filth that could send you to the grave, so ale's the safest thing you've got, even for the little ones. You sit with your own mug, the ale's faint tang washing away the grit in your throat. It's weak brewed by the alewife down the lane, more like liquid bread than anything that'd make you tipsy. You've been drinking it since you were a kid yourself, back when your mother poured it alongside a crust of barley bread to start the day. Now your kids do the same, their faces smudged with dirt, as they gulp it down before heading out to chase chickens or weed the fields. It's not about fun, nobody's giggling or slurring their words. It's about staying alive in a world where water's more likely to kill you than quench your thirst. The stream's a sewer full of cow dung laundry runoff, and worse, in every sip's a roll of the dice. Ale boiled and fermented is your shield against the sickness that took your neighbour's boy last summer. The jug's always on the table, a constant in your life. You pour it for breakfast, a thin porridge on the side if you're lucky. At midday, when the sun's baking the fields and your throat's dry as dust, you pass the jug around, kids and adults alike, taking swigs between tasks. By supper it's ale again, washing down a lump of bread or a watery stew. Your kids drink it like you drink it, like their grandparents did, because it's what there is. It's not strong, nothing like the Lord's wine or the monk's mead. The alewife brews it light, just enough kick to keep it from spoiling, but not enough to make your head spin. Your kids aren't stumbling or singing, they're just hydrated, their bellies full enough to keep working, their eyes clear, but tired because life's hard enough without a buzz. You watch your daughter sip her ale, her small hands steady on the mug, and you wonder what outsiders would think. In your village, it's normal as ordinary as the church bells or the mud on your shoes. Nobody bats an eye when a toddler waddles over with a cup, or when a boy of 10 downs a pint while mending a fence. Ale's not a treat. It's a need like air or sleep. You've tried water when the jug's empty, or the alewife's behind on her brew. You boiled it, strained it through a cloth, prayed over it, but it still left you queasy, your stomach twisting for days. The healer says the stream's cursed or maybe just filthy, but either way, you're not risking it on the kids. Ale's safer, cheaper than wine, and the alewife's always got a batch traded for a handful of grain or a mended pot. You've heard about the nobles and it makes you scoff. They've got wells deep and clean pulling up water you'd kill for. Some even filter it, pouring it through charcoal like they're alchemists. But they don't drink it much. They're too busy guzzling wine red and gold, shipped from lands you'll never see. Wine's their flex, a way to show they're above the ale you and your kids live on. You've tasted it once, a sip from a manor cask, and it was like fire and fruit, nothing like your sour ale. But wine's for feasts, not for you, and certainly not for your kids. They'll stick to ale same as you, because it's what keeps the family standing, even if it tastes like regret. The village runs on this stuff. The alewife's hut is a hub, her cauldron bubbling day and night, her hands stained with malt. She's your lifeline, trading jugs for whatever you can spare, eggs, cloth, a day's labour. She laughs about it, saying her ale's the only thing keeping the priest from burying half the village. She's not wrong. You've seen what bad water does: fevers, cramps, kids gone before they're grown. Ale's not perfect. It's heavy in your gut, and the kids sometimes whine about the taste. But it's better than the alternative, better than watching your son sweat and shake from a sip of stream water. You pour another round the jug lighter now, and hope the alewife's got more tomorrow. It's not so different from today's world in a twisted way. Picture parents giving their kids energy drinks loaded with sugar and caffeine because it's normal and keeps them going. They shrug it off, same as you do with ale, because it's what's available, what's accepted. Or imagine a place where the tap water's so bad you hand your toddler a soda knowing it's not great but better than the risk. That's your life, except there's no corner store, no bottled water, just ale and the stream, and one's a death trap. Modern folks would clutch their pearls, seeing your kids with mugs of ale, but they don't know what it's like to choose between thirst and survival, to pick the lesser poison every day. The twist is what makes it bearable and a little sad. This ale, the stuff you pour for breakfast, is so weak it's barely a drink. It's not getting anyone drunk, not you, not the kids, not even old Tom, who downs it like it's his job. The alewife brews it light, just enough fermentation to kill the germs, but not enough to make you see stars. Your kids aren't tipsy by noon. They're just fed their bellies full of liquid grain, their heads clear but their lives heavy. They're sober, working the fields or scrubbing pots, as miserable as you are in a world that offers no better options. The ale's not a party, it's a lifeline, and it's all you've got to keep the family safe. You set the jug down the fire, crackling low, and watch your kids finish their mugs. They're quiet, tired from a day of chores, their faces smudged but alive. You'll head to the alewife's tomorrow, trade what you can and keep the jug full. The stream's still there, burbling outside, tempting and treacherous. You've made your choice: ale for breakfast, ale for life, because it's the only way to keep the sickness at bay. You pull your kids close, their warmth, a small comfort, and hope the next batch tastes a little better. It probably won't, but you'll drink it anyway, and so will they, because in this world survival tastes like sour bread and smells like the alewife's hut. Did monks eat better than kings? The heavy oak door creaks as you step into the monastery's refectory, a long stone hall bathed in the golden glow of flickering candles. The air is warm, scented with roasted fish, fresh baked bread, and a faint whiff of sweet wine that makes your mouth water. Rows of monks sit at polished tables, their brown robes brushing the floor, their heads bowed in silent prayer before the meal begins. You're a visitor granted a rare seat among them, and your stomach twists with a mix of awe and envy. Outside, the village scrapes by on mouldy gruel and stale crusts, but here the table groans under platters of poached salmon, wheels of creamy cheese, and baskets of apples so red they look polished. You're in a house of God where vows of poverty are supposed to reign, but this spread feels more like a lord's feast than a peasant's dream. You settle onto a bench, the wood smooth under your rough hands, and a young monk sets a plate before you. There's a slab of fish, its flesh tender and glazed with herbs, flanked by a wedge of cheese that smells rich and tangy. A hunk of bread, soft and golden, sits beside a clay cup of wine, its ruby glow catching the light. You take a bite of the fish and it melts on your tongue. The dill and salt a shock after years of barley mush. The bread's crust crackles, its inside fluffy, nothing like the rock-hard loaves you choke down at home. The wine's sharp and sweet, warming your chest, a far cry from the cloudy ale you trade your last eggs for. You glance at the monks, their faces calm, their plates just as full, and wonder how this is simple living. The monastery's wealth is no secret, not to you. You've seen their fields stretching across the valley, worked by tenants who pay in grain, wool, and labour. Their orchards burst with fruit, their streams teem with fish, and their beehives drip with honey. The monks own land more than most lords gifted by kings and nobles seeking God's favour. They've got barns stuffed with barley cellars, lined with wine casks and kitchens that hum with activity, staffed by lay brothers who roast, bake, and brew. Their poverty is a vow, not a reality. While you count crumbs to feed your kids, they're dining on meals that could shame a knight's table. You're not sure if you're impressed or angry, but the cheese is too good to stop eating. The monks don't see it as luxury, or so they say. Their rule, written by some saint long ago, calls for moderation: bread, fish, vegetables, wine in measure. Meats rare save for the sick, or special days, but you've never tasted pork, so their sacrifice feels like a joke. They fast, often skipping meals for prayer, but when they eat, it's like this fresh, varied enough to fill their bellies twice over. You've heard them pray for the poor, their voices echoing in the chapel, but the irony stings. Outside their walls, peasants like you are starving their kids, hollow-eyed, their pots empty. You've scraped mould off bread to survive, while these monks turn away perfectly good fish because it's too rich for a fast day. You bite into an apple, its juice dripping down your chin, and try not to think about your daughter, who's never tasted fruit this sweet. The refectory's quiet, save for the clink of cups and the soft scrape of knives. A monk reads from a holy book, his voice droning over the meal, but you're distracted by the food. There's a bowl of peas stewed with onions and a slice of pie, its crust flaky, its filling a mix of dried fruit and honey. You've never seen so much in one place, not even at the Lord's Manor, where the tables are flashy but the meat's often tough. The monks eat slowly, their movements precise, as if every bite's a prayer. You mimic them, not wanting to seem greedy, but your hands shake with the urge to grab more. This isn't just food. It's a glimpse of a life you'll never have, a world where hunger's a choice, not a chain. You think about the nobles, and even their feasts don't always match this. The Lord's table has swan and peacock, but they're more show than substance. The meat stringy, the spices masking rot. The monk's food is simpler, but better fresh, well cooked. No need for pepper to hide flaws. You've heard of kings dining on venison and wine, but their cooks can't match the monastery's steady supply, its fields and cellars, a machine that never stops. The monks aren't eating to flex, not like the Lord with his saffron, but they're not suffering either. Their humility comes with a full plate, while your humility's a half-empty bowl and a prayer for tomorrow's harvest. It's not so different from today's world in a way. Picture those minimalist types preaching simplicity from their sleek apartments, their coffee tables costing more than your hut. They've got their organic kale and artisanal bread, calling it humble while you're stretching a sack of oats to last a month. Or think of someone going vegan, but only eating fancy avocado toast, drizzled with truffle oil, their sacrifice a performance for clout. The monks are like that, their vows of poverty, dressed up in meals you'd kill for their simplicity, a luxury you can't afford. You're not sure whether to laugh or cry, but the pie's too good to dwell on it. The twist hits like a sour note in the wine. The monks call this God's will, their full tables a divine blessing for their holy work. They pray, they scribe, they tend the sick, and they eat believing it's all part of the plan. Meanwhile, outside their gates, you and your neighbours starve your fields, tax to feed the monastery's wealth. You've seen them turn away beggars, their alms meagre, their gates locked. You've heard them preach about charity, but their barns stay full while your kids go hungry. It's not malice, not exactly they believe they're doing right, that God wants them fed so they can pray for your soul, but it's hard to swallow literally and figuratively when your bowl's empty and theirs is piled high. The meal ends, the monks rising in unison, their plates cleared by silent lay brothers. You linger, savouring the last sip of wine, the last crumb of bread, knowing you'll never eat like this again. The refectory's warm, the candles still burning, but you feel a chill as you step outside. The village waits, its huts dark, its people scraping by on less than the monk's scraps. You pass a beggar by the gate, his hand out, his eyes hopeless. The monastery looms behind you, its walls high, its fields fat with grain. You clutch your cloak, your stomach full, but your heart heavy, and head home wondering if God's will includes the hunger you'll face tomorrow. The monks eat better than kings, but it's the peasants who pay the price. Why was famine a personality trait? The wind cuts through your threadbare tunic like a knife, and your breath clouds in the frigid air as you trudge across a barren field, your cracked hands clutching a hoe that feels heavier with every step. The ground is hard, the crops long dead, their stalks brittle and grey, under a sky that's forgotten how to rain. Your stomach's a hollow pit, growling so fiercely it drowns out the distant church bells. You're a peasant, and hunger's not just a feeling, it's your shadow, your neighbour, your life. The village is gaunt, its people moving like ghosts, their faces pinched, their eyes dull. Famine's here again, a cruel guest who never leaves, and you're not sure if you'll outlive it this time. Your hut is no refuge, just a damp shell of wattle and daub, the air inside thick with the smell of smoke and despair. The pantry's a joke, a sack of mouldy barley, a few shriveled turnips and a bone you've boiled so many times it's more memory than meat. You light a weak fire, your fingers numb, and stir a pot of gruel so thin it's practically water. Your kids huddle close, their small bodies shivering. Their voices quiet because whining won't fill their bellies. You portion out the slop, giving them the bigger shares, and chew a scrap of bread so hard it could break a tooth. It's not food, it's survival. A bitter trick to keep death at bay for another day. You've been hungry before, but this famine's different, deeper meaner, like it's carved itself into your bones. The famine's not a surprise, not really. The harvest failed last summer, the fields drowned by endless rain that turned the soil to mud. The wheat rotted before it could ripen, the barley mildewed, and the peas never stood a chance. You worked those fields, your back breaking under the plough, but nature didn't care. Then winter came early, the frost killing what little you'd salvaged. You've heard it's not just your village travellers talk of whole regions starving, their roads lined with beggars and bones. War's to blame too, the Lord's men trampling crops to fight some feud you'll never understand. They took your best grain for their horses, leaving you with nothing but promises of next year. Next year feels like a fairy tale, as real as the gold you'll never touch. You're not alone in this misery, but that's no comfort. The village is a graveyard of hope, every hut echoing with the same hunger. Old Tom stopped talking, his wife gone, after eating grass that tore her insides. The alewife's brewing less her barley too precious to ferment. Even the kids, usually loud with games, are listless, their ribs sharp under their skin. You share what you can, a crust, a sip of broth, but it's never enough. You've tried foraging, scouring the woods for berries or roots, but the forest picked clean the animals long gone. You've boiled nettles, chewed bark, even tried a mushroom once that left you heaving in the dirt. Hunger makes you reckless, but it doesn't make you full. The Lord's manor looms on the hill, its chimneys puffing smoke that smells of roasted meat and warm bread. You've seen their carts piled with grain and pigs while your taxes strip you bare. The nobles aren't starving, they've got barns stuffed with last year's harvest cellars full of wine kitchens that churn out feasts. You've heard they're hoarding, locking their stores while the village begs. You hauled your last sack of barley to their gate, your rent for the land you work, and got nothing but a grunt from the steward. Your labour feeds them, your crops fill their plates, but when famine comes, they turn away. Their gates barred, their dogs snapping at anyone who lingers. You hate them, but you're too weak to do more than curse under your breath. Life's a gamble now, every day, a question of survival. You ration the gruel skip meals to stretch the sack and lie awake at night. Your stomach screaming, your kids' whimpers, cutting deeper than the cold. You've seen what famine does, takes the old first, then the young, then the strong if it lingers. The churchyard's full, the priest's prayers thinner than your soup. You've tried praying too, but God's silent and the hunger's louder. You've heard of villages eating rats, dogs even worse, and you're not there yet, but you're close. The dog's still alive, his eyes trusting, but you avoid looking at him, afraid of what you might do if the pot stays empty. Today's world knows hunger too, though it's dressed up differently. Picture a family skipping meals to pay rent, their fridge bare, their kids eating school lunch because it's all they've got. Or imagine a city where the stores are empty, no delivery apps, no safety net, just you and your hunger, and a line at a soup kitchen that's too long. That's your famine, but worse, no government aid, no Red Cross, just you and the village, and a lord who'd rather feast than share. Modern folks would panic if their food apps shut down for a week. You're living a year of cancelled orders with no hope of a refund or a restock. The twist is what makes your blood boil, a bitter pill you can't swallow. While you're starving, the nobles are throwing feasts not despite the famine, but because of it. You've heard the rumours whispered by a servant who slipped you a crust banquets at the manor tables, groaning with venison swans and spiced pies. The Lord's guests laughing as the village dies. They're flexing, showing off their wealth, their power, their untouchable lives. Starvation's just the backdrop, a way to make their plates shine brighter. You've seen their fires glow, smelled their roasts from miles away while your kids cry for a crumb. They're not hungry, not desperate, just cruel. Their feasts are slapped to every empty belly outside their walls. You stir the gruel, the fire barely alive, and portion it out. Your hands steady despite the ache in your gut. The kids eat their spoons, scraping the bowl, and you take a sip, saving the rest for tomorrow. The famine's here, a guest you can't evict, but you're still fighting, still breathing, still hoping for spring. You glance at the manor's hill, its lights mocking you, and clench your jaw. You'll survive this somehow through grit, through luck, through prayers that might go unanswered. The nobles can feast, but you'll keep going because famine's not just a trait, it's a battle, and you're not done yet. We're medieval doctors, just food poisoning experts. The air in your cramped hut is heavy with the sour stink of sweat and sickness, and you're curled up on a straw mat, clutching your stomach as it twists like a wrung rag. Your head pounds, your mouth tastes like metal, and every move sends a wave of nausea crashing through you. You're a peasant and you're sick again, probably from that fish stew you ate last night, its greasy aftertaste lingering like a bad omen. The village doctor, a wiry man with a stained cloak and a bag of questionable tools, kneels beside you, his breath reeking of onions as he squints at your pale face. He mutters something about bad humours and tainted food, then pulls out a rusty knife suggesting a bleed to fix you. You're too weak to argue, but as he sharpens his blade, you wonder if he's here to heal you or just guess what's in your soup. Your misery started at supper when you spooned up that stew, the fish a little too soft, its smell a bit too sharp. You ate it anyway because hunger doesn't care about caution, and the market's fishmonger swore it was fresh. By midnight you were heaving into a bucket, your insides rebelling, your kids watching with wide, scared eyes. Food's a gamble in your world. Spoiled meat, mouldy bread, cheese that's more fuzz than dairy, and you lose more often than you'd like. The pantry's a breeding ground for trouble with no way to keep things cold or clean. Grain sacks sprout mould, in the damp meat turns green if it sits too long, and the stream you wash your pots in is as filthy as the village latrine. You've learnt to sniff, scrape, and boil, but sometimes, like last night, the bad stuff slips through, and now you're paying the price. The doctor's no help, not really. He's not trained, not like the fancy physicians in cities who read books and charge gold. He's just the guy who showed up with herbs and a knife claiming he knows what's what. He pokes your belly, asks about the stew, and nods like he's solved a mystery. Fish, he declares, gone off in the gut. You could have told him that, but he's already rummaging in his bag, pulling out a jar of leeches and a vial of something that smells like rotting leaves. He says bleeding will balance your humours, and the potion ground weeds and who knows what will purge the poison. You wince as the leeches latch onto your arm, their cold, slimy bodies sucking away what little strength you have. The potion burns, going down, and within minutes you're retching again, weaker than before. You're not sure if this is medicine or punishment, but you're out a coin either way. You're not alone in this mess. The village is a parade of upset stomachs, with half your neighbours nursing cramps or worse from bad food. Old Tom's still shaky from a sausage that wasn't pork, and the alewife's boy spent a week in bed after eating mouldy rye that made him see shadows. Food poisoning's as common as rain, thanks to shoddy storage and no concept of clean. You've seen meat hung until it's black cheese left to sweat in the sun, bread baked with flour full of weevils. The market's no better. Butchers sell beef that's suspiciously gamey, and fishmongers hawk catches that have been dead longer than you've been sick. Nobody checks, nobody cares. And when you get sick, it's on you to survive or not. The doctor's cures are a roll of the dice and the odds aren't great. Bleeding's his favourite, leaving you faint and clammy, your arm bruised where the knife nicked you. If it's not leeches, it's purges, drinks that make you vomit until you're hollow, or worse, send you sprinting to the latrine. He's got herbs too, some harmless, some not, like the time you gave your neighbour a tea that left her twitching for hours. He talks big, tossing around words like bile and flux, but you suspect he's just guessing, blaming your stew, because it's easier than admitting he's clueless. You've heard of people dying under his care. Their cure worse than the sickness, but what choice do you have? The priest's prayers cost less, but they don't stop the cramps, and the healer's herbs are a day's walk away. You think about the nobles and it makes you grit your teeth. They get sick. Too spoiled venison or bad wine can ruin their feasts, but their doctors are better, or at least more expensive. They've got spiced broths to settle their stomachs, clean water you'd kill for, and beds to recover in. You're stuck on a dirt floor, your kids crying. Your doctor muttering about humours while you sweat through your tunic. The manor's kitchen even has cooks who double as poison testers, a job you didn't know existed until you saw one at a feast nibbling the Lord's food to check for rot or worse. They're not doctors, but they're sharper than your guy sniffing out bad fish before it hits the table. You've got no tester, just your nose and a prayer, and last night both failed you. It's not so different from today's world in a way. Picture someone scrolling online, their stomach churning, and WebMD spitting out food poisoning, or maybe cancer with equal confidence. Or think of those sketchy diet gurus peddling cleanses and pills with big promises, and no proof their followers sicker than when they started. Modern folks have tests, labs, and laws to catch bad food. You've got nothing but a doctor who's half cook, half con man charging you for a cure that's mostly hope. You'd laugh if you weren't so weak, if every heave didn't remind you how close you are to the edge. The twist is where it gets wild and a little absurd. Some doctors in bigger towns aren't just healers. They're cooks moonlighting as poison testers for lords or merchants. You've heard the stories: a man who stirs the Lord's soup, takes a bite and waits his life on the line to catch a bad batch or a sneaky assassin. They're not saving you though, they're saving the rich while you're left with leeches, and a guy who thinks bleeding cures fish. It's multitasking medieval style, and you'd admire the hustle if it didn't highlight how little anyone cares about your gut. The cook doctor's out there tasting salmon, while you're tasting regret, your stew a mystery nobody's solving. The doctor's gone now, his coins in his pocket, leaving you with a jar of leeches and a warning to avoid fish. You're still sick, but you're alive, which is more than some can say. You sip water boiled because you're not stupid, and try to keep it down. The kids are quiet watching you, and you force a smile, promising better food tomorrow. You'll go to the market, sniff every fish check, every loaf, because you're your own doctor now, better than the one who bled you dry. The stew's in the dirt, a lesson you won't forget, and you lie back, your stomach settling, hoping the next meal doesn't try to kill you. It probably will, but you'll eat it anyway because that's life. Guess. Pray and hope the soup's not the end. Why did they think food could curse you? The fire in your hut sputters, casting long shadows on the dirt walls as you sit at a wobbly table, your hands trembling over a bowl of watery gruel. A gust of wind rattles the door, and you flinch, your spoon slipping, spilling a precious drop of broth onto the table. Your heart skips, not from the waste, but from the dread that claws at you, spilling food. Isn't just clumsy, it's dangerous, a crack in the world that lets bad things in. You're a peasant, and in your village, food isn't just sustenance. It's a thread tied to fate, fragile and fraught with peril. You wipe the spill fast, muttering a prayer under your breath, hoping you haven't just cursed your family with a single careless move. Every bite in this world feels like a ritual, heavy with meaning you didn't choose. You've grown up hearing the warnings passed down like recipes. Spill salt, and you're tempting evil spirits, inviting them to sit at your table. Drop bread, and you're disrespecting God's gift, risking a year of hunger. Waste a crumb, and the harvest might fail, the fields turning barren as punishment. You're careful, always careful, cutting your bread with a steady hand, pouring ale without a splash, teaching your kids to do the same. Your daughter, barely 7, watches you now, her eyes wide as you sprinkle a pinch of salt into the pot, not for taste but to ward off whatever lurks in the dark. You don't know if you believe it all, but you've seen too much sick kids dead, crops empty winters to take chances. The village is alive with these fears, a web of rules that bind every meal. Your neighbour Agnes won't eat eggs on Fridays, convinced they'll anger the saints. Old Tom swears a spilled milk jug brought the fever that took his son. The alewife crosses herself before brewing muttering charms to keep her barrels from souring. You've all got stories whispered over shared fires of food gone wrong, a loaf that bled when cut, a stew that turned black overnight, a cheese that screamed when sliced. The priest says it's the devil's work, or witches, their curses spoiling what little you have. You nod in church, your head bowed, but the fear sticks a knot in your gut tighter than hunger. Every meal's a test, every spill a threat, and you're never sure if you're safe. It's not just spills that scare you, it's the food itself, how it can turn on you. Last spring your barley went bad, the grain speckled with a strange black fuzz. You scraped it off, boiled it long, but the gruel still tasted wrong, sharp and tingling. By evening your hands shook, and the world fell off like the shadows were watching. You recovered, but you've heard worse villages where bad rye sent people raving, seeing demons or angels before they collapsed. The priest blamed a witch, an old woman who lived alone, her garden too green when everyone else's failed. They dragged her to the square, her screams drowned by the crowd, and burned her, saying her curse spoiled the crops. You didn't go, but you smelled the smoke, and when your next loaf moulded, you wondered if they got the right person. The market's no comfort, its stalls buzzing with whispers of hexes. The baker's bread's too heavy, maybe cursed with bad flour. The fishmonger's trout are dull-eyed, their stink a sign of dark magic. You haggle, but you're also watching, listening for the vendor's tone, the crowd's gossip. Last month a cheesemonger was shunned, his wares blamed for a wave of sickness. Nobody proved anything but his stall's empty now, his family gone. You buy sparingly, sniffing every purchase because a bad apple or a sour jug could be more than rot. It could be a spell aimed at your hearth. You've seen the Lord's men seize cursed food, tossing it to the fire while the seller begs. And you wonder how much was witchcraft and how much was just mould. You think about today's world where food's still tangled in myths, just less spooky. People demonize bread or sugar, calling them poison, like your priest cursing spilled salt. They chase diets based on fear, shunning gluten or meat because some guru says it's bad vibes. It's not so different from your village where a bad harvest means a witch's hand, not just rain. Imagine burning your toast and thinking it's a sign the universe is out to get you, or throwing out perfectly good milk because a blog said it's cursed. That's your life, except your fears aren't online, they're carved into every meal, every spill, every mouldy crust you can't afford to toss. The twist is where it gets grim and a little absurd. Half the cursed food you're so afraid of is just spoiled, ruined by damp cellars or lazy vendors, not witches or demons. That black fuzz on your barley mould. Not magic, but the village doesn't know the difference. They'll burn a woman before they'll clean their sacks, blaming her for a bad crop or a sour stew. You've seen it happen, lonely widows, strange old men. Anyone who doesn't fit accused of hexing the harvest. The real curse is ignorance, but it's easier to light a pyre than admit the grain's gone bad. You've eaten mouldy food yourself, scraping off the worst, praying it's safe, because starvation's a worse spell than any witch could cast. You finish your gruel, careful not to spill, and set the bowl down with a soft touch like it's holy. The kids are asleep, the fire low, and you sweep the table for crumbs, tucking them into a rag for tomorrow's soup. You glance at the door, half expecting a shadow to slip through, but it's just the wind. The village is quiet, the priest's warnings echoing in your head. Watch your food, guard your soul, fear the curse. You don't know what's real, not anymore, but you'll keep praying, keep cooking, keep eating. Because life's a gamble and every bite's a chance to beat the odds. You lie down the straw, scratching did minorities eat differently or just suffer more. The evening air is cool as you sit in the cramped candlelit room of your home, a modest wooden house tucked away in the Jewish quarter of a bustling medieval town. The walls are thin, and the distant clamour of the market square filters through, mingling with the soft crackle of your small fire. Your hands, worn from sewing and scrubbing, stir a pot of lentil stew, its earthy aroma laced with onions and a precious pinch of cumin you've hoarded for months. Your family gathers around a scarred table, their faces lit by the flickering flame, waiting for the meal you've stretched to feed them all. You're a Jewish woman, and in this world every bite is a negotiation between faith survival and a society that marks you as different, forcing you to carve out a life on the edges, while hunger and fear lurk closer than you'd like. Your kitchen is a fortress of rules, shaped by the laws of your faith and the walls of exclusion around you. The Torah guides your meals: no pork, no shellfish, no mixing meat with dairy. Every animal slaughtered with care and prayer. You've kept kosher, as your mother did, even when it's hard. The market's a maze of forbidden foods, its stalls brimming with bacon sausages and creamy cheeses you can't touch. The Christian butchers dominate their meat, unclean by your standards, and the fishmonger's prices are steep. His best catch is sold to the monastery before you arrive. You rely on what you can get: lentils, barley vegetables like leeks or cabbage, often bruised from being market leftovers. Your husband, a scribe, brings home what coins he can, but they're never enough, not with taxes that hit your community harder and guilds that bar you from better trade. Tonight's stew is a triumph, though it doesn't look like much. You've soaked the lentils overnight, boiled them with onions you bartered for, and added a sprig of parsley from your tiny garden. The cumin's a treasure, traded from a travelling merchant who passes through the quarter. His wares a lifeline to spices your neighbours can't dream of. You bake flatbread, your hands kneading dough from coarse flour. The oven's heat a rare luxury you share with other families in the quarter. Your kids eat slowly, savouring the warmth, while you take the smallest share your stomach used to waiting. This meal is yours, born of faith and ingenuity, but it's also a reminder of what you can't have: meat most days, fruit beyond apples, a table free from worry. The town doesn't make it easy. You're confined to the quarter, a walled-off corner where your community lives, works, and prays under laws that brand you outsiders. The market opens late for you, after the Christians take the best goods and vendors overcharge knowing you've got few options. You've heard of Muslim families in other towns facing their own bans and barriers. Their halal diets as strict as yours, their markets just as cruel. Travellers speak of Romani, or other wanderers shunned and scavenging their meals whatever the road offers. For all of you, food's not just about hunger. It's about surviving a world that pushes you to the margins, where every loaf is a fight and every spice a small rebellion. Persecution's a constant shadow, sharpening the sting of every meal. You've seen the crowds turn ugly, blaming your people for bad harvests or sick cows, their anger spilling into the quarter with fists and fire. The church preaches against you, calling your faith a sin, your food strange, your existence a threat. You've paid taxes just to live here, extra coins for wearing a yellow badge that marks you in the market. Some days the gates are locked and you're cut off, forced to stretch your pantry until it's just dust and prayer. You've eaten gruel so thin it's barely food-boiled roots. When the lentils ran out all while the town feasts on pork, you wouldn't touch even if they offered. Your faith keeps you steady, but it doesn't fill your belly. The market's dangers go beyond price or scarcity. You've heard whispers of vendors tampering with goods sold to your quarter-mouldy grain, rancid oil meat too old for even their dogs. You check every purchase, sniffing, poking, because a bad batch could sicken your family, and there's no doctor you can afford. You've learnt to make do, turning scraps into sustenance. You stew vegetable peels with herbs, grind stale bread into porridge pickle cabbage to last the winter. Your community shares secrets, how to stretch a fish into 3 meals, how to dry figs for months of sweetness. These aren't just recipes, they're defiance, a way to hold on to who you are when the world tries to strip it away. You think about today's world, where people face their own food walls. Picture someone keeping halal or kosher in a small town, the only store stocked with pork and processed junk, no options for miles. Or imagine being gluten-free or vegan in a place where every menu's meat and bread, the locals rolling their eyes at your picky ways. Now add systemic barriers. Jobs you can't get, taxes that hit harder, neighbourhoods where you're not welcome. That's your life, except there's no supermarket, no delivery app, just a market that sneers and a faith that demands you stay true. Modern folks might complain about dietary restrictions. You live them under a weight that could crush you every meal, a balance of soul and survival. The twist is where your heart lifts even in the dark. Despite the exclusion, your community's food is a live, vibrant, a quiet act of resistance. You've tasted dishes born of necessity, but rich with history, stews of chickpeas and garlic breads, braided for the Sabbath sweets of honey and almonds saved for holy days. These recipes come from your ancestors, carried across lands and years, adapted to this harsh place. Your neighbour Miriam makes a fish dish with vinegar and spices, a taste of her family's past in warmer lands. The quarter's children learn to knead dough, their hands shaping tradition as much as bread. The market may lock you out, but you've built your own table, your food a banner of who you are, unbroken by the town's scorn. You serve the stew, your family's voices soft as they bless the meal. A moment of peace in a world that offers little. The candles flicker, the quarter's sounds, laughter, prayer life seeping through the walls. You eat the cumin's warmth, a spark of joy, and think of the recipes you'll pass to your daughter, the ones that kept you whole. The town can exclude tax or curse you, but they can't take this. Your food, your faith, your defiance. You clear the table, save the scraps for tomorrow, and lie down the hunger at bay for now. Tomorrow's market will be hard, the world harder, but you'll cook again, turning suffering into something that tastes like home. Why was feasting a political stunt? The great hall pulses with life, a dazzling chaos of torchlight laughter and the clink of silver goblets that makes your heart race. You're seated at a long table draped in fine linen, surrounded by lords in velvet and ladies whose jewels gleam like stars. The air is thick with the scent of roasted boar, spiced wine, and fresh baked bread so rich it drowns out the faint whiff of smoke from the massive hearth. Servants weave through the crowd, their arms laden with platters. A whole swan, its feathers reattached for show. A pie that spills custard when cracked open, and fruits you've never seen their colours vivid against the candlelight. You're a guest at the Lord's feast, a spectacle of wealth and power, but every bite feels like a move in a game you don't fully understand. And the Lord's smile at the head of the table hides more than it reveals. Your plate is piled high, a dizzying array of foods you'd never touch in your village. There's venison tender and swimming in a peppery sauce that burns your tongue, alongside slices of pork crusted with herbs you can't name. A servant drops a strange wrinkled orange beside you, its sharp sweetness a shock after years of sour apples. You tear into a loaf of white bread, soft as a cloud, and sip wine from a goblet so heavy it could double as a club. The flavours are overwhelming each dish, a testament to the Lord's wealth, but you're not here to eat, you're here to witness his power. This feast isn't about feeding you, it's about showing you, and every other guest, that he can command a table like a king commands an army. The hall is a stage, and every detail is a prop. The Lord's at the high table, his fur-trimmed cloak catching the light, his voice booming, as he toasts a new alliance with a rival lord seated nearby. The rival smiles, but his eyes are sharp, his hand lingering near his dagger. You've heard whispers. This feast seals a truce, a marriage, a deal to split land after a bloody feud. The food's a contract, each platter a promise, each spice a signature. Saffron gleams in the custard, worth more than your hut. Cinnamon scents the wine, a fortune in every sip. The Lord's not just feeding his guests, he's flexing, proving he can afford to burn gold on a single night, while your village scrapes by on gruel. You chew slowly, watching the room, because every glance, every toast is a move in a chess game, where losing means war. The guests are players too, their silk and jewels a match for the Lord's display. A knight brags about his hunt, his plate piled higher than yours, his laughter loud to drown out his debts. A lady in blue velvet picks at her swan, not eating but posing her every gesture, a signal to the men watching. You spot a cluster of merchants, their fingers glittering with rings, nodding at the Lord's, every word their trade routes now his to command. Even the poor are here, a handful of villagers like you, wide-eyed at the edges of the hall. You're not guests, you're prop-proof. Of the Lord's generosity, allowed a crust and a sip to show he cares for his people. You know the truth, your taxes paid for this feast, your fields stripped to fill these plates, but you eat anyway, because a crumb from this table is more than you've seen in weeks. The noise builds, the wine flows, and the tension hums beneath it all. You've heard stories of feasts like this. Alliances, forged betrayals, planned rivals leaving in coffins. Every dish is a risk, every servant a potential spy. You glance at your wine, its ruby glow suddenly ominous, and wonder who tasted it first. The Lord's cook. A grim-faced man you saw in the kitchen is rumoured to test each plate. His life the price of a bad batch or a deliberate one. You take a sip, your throat tight, because refusing would insult the host, and insults here cut deeper than knives. The Lord's smile hasn't faltered, but you catch him watching his rival. Their eyes locked over raised goblets, and you wonder what's in that wine besides grapes. You think about today's world where power still plays out over plates. Picture a corporate gala, all suits and champagne, where the CEO's hosting to close a deal or crush a competitor. The food's fancy, the speech is polished, but it's the same game, flexing wealth, ceiling packs showing who's boss. Or imagine an influencer's dinner party, every dish, staged for social media, the guest list, a who's who of clout, all smiles and subtext. That's this feast, but with higher stakes and worse odds. You're not posting to LinkedIn, you're eating to survive a night where the wrong toast could spark a war, the wrong bite could end you. The twist is where it gets dark and your stomach lurches. Poison's no stranger to these tables, a silent guest as common as the wine. You've heard the tales, a lord's rival, choking on his pheasant, a lady collapsing after a sip, their deaths blamed on bad food while the host mourns too loudly. The Lord's smile, so warm now, feels like a mask, his hand steady as he offers you more wine. You've seen the kitchen, its chaos of cooks and tasters, and know a skilled hand could slip something into a dish, a goblet, a pie. The Lord's rival eats sparingly, his knife cutting small bites, his eyes on the host. You follow his lead, pushing your plate away, your appetite gone. This isn't just a feast, it's a battlefield where the weapons are hidden in the sauce, and trust is as rare as the saffron. The hall grows louder. The guests drunker, their voices drowning out the lute player in the corner. A knight spills wine, laughing it off, but his rival's hand tightens on his goblets. The Lord calls for more food. A peacock, its tail fanned for show, its meat dry, but dazzling. Servants rush, their faces blank, their hands quick to avoid a noble's wrath. You spot a villager like you, his eyes wide as he gnaws a bone, unaware of the game around him. You envy his ignorance, but you're too deep in the web now, watching every move, tasting every bite with care. The Lord toasts again, his voice smooth, his eyes cold, and you raise your cup praying it's just wine. The feast drags on, the candles burning low, the air thick with grease and intrigue. You slip out as the dancing starts, the cool night air a shock after the hall's heat. The stars are bright, the village dark, its huts a world away from this glittering trap. You've eaten better than ever, but your stomach's knotted, your mind racing with what you've seen. Alliances, enemies, poison in the shadows. The Lord's feast was no party. It was a stunt, a stage for power, where every bite was a bet, every guest a pawn. You head home, your hands empty, but your life intact, hoping you're not on the wrong side of the Lord's next toast. You probably are, but for now you're alive, and that's victory enough. Would you survive a medieval meal? You're seated at a rough-hewn table in a smoky tavern, the air thick with the stench of sweat-burning wood, and something sour you can't quite place. The wooden bench creaks under you, and your hands grip a chipped clay mug. Its contents a cloudy ale that smells like old bread. Before you lies a meal that's supposed to keep you alive. A hunk of greyish bread speckled with green fuzz, a bowl of watery gruel, flecked with bits of cabbage, and a sliver of fish so pungent it makes your eyes water. The tavern's dim, lit by flickering rushlights, and the other diners peasants like you, their faces gaunt, eat in silence, their spoons scraping bowls with grim determination. You're about to take your first bite, but your stomach twists not just from hunger, but from the nagging fear that this meal might be your last. Welcome to a medieval dinner where every mouthful is a roll of the dice, and survival's the only prize. The bread's your first challenge. A dense slab that could double as a doorstop. You tear into it, wincing as it crunches the mouldy patches, leaving a bitter tang on your tongue. You've heard the stories bread like this laced with ergot, or weevils can send you raving seeing demons before you collapse. You chew fast, hoping to outrun the risk, but it's no use. The grit sticks in your teeth. And you're already wondering if you should have scraped off more of the green. This isn't dining. It's a test one you face daily, because the harvest's thin, the pantry's damp, and wasting food is a sin you can't afford. You glance at the tavern keeper who swears the bread's fresh, but his grin's as trustworthy as the fishmonger's fresh trout, which is to say, not at all. Next you eye the gruel, a grey sludge that's more water than grain, its surface shimmering with a suspicious sheen. You scoop a spoonful, dodging a floating bit that might be cabbage, or something worse. The taste is bland at best, sour at worst, and you're pretty sure it's from barley that sat too long in a mouldy sack. You've been sick from gruel before your guts twisting for days, after a bad batch, and you know others who didn't make it. Kids mostly too small to fight the poison. The ale's your only comfort, weak and bitter, but safer than the stream outside where the water's a cocktail of dung laundry runoff and dead rats. You sip it, grateful for the alewife's brew, because without it you'd be gambling with every drink, your throat parched, but your life on the line. You're a peasant, and this meal's your reality, a far cry from the feasts you've heard about up at the Lord's Manor. There they're tearing into roasted swans and sipping spiced wine, their tables groaning. Under the weight of food your village grew, but will never taste. You've hauled grain to their barns, your back breaking under the sacks only to eat the scraps. Coarse flour, bruised vegetables, fish too old for their dogs. The nobles don't worry about mould or bad water. They've got Cleanwell's poison testers and spices to mask the rot. You meanwhile are praying your fish doesn't send you to the privy or the graveyard. Class isn't just status, it's survival. And you're on the losing side, your plate, a daily reminder of where you stand. The tavern's other diners tell the same story. Across from you, a woman picks weevils from her bread, her hands steady from years of practice. A man sips his ale, his eyes hollow, his kids at home likely eating even less. You've all faced famine, that uninvited guest who turns hunger into a lifestyle, stripping your fields and your hope. You've boiled nettles, eaten rats, even considered the dog when the pantry ran dry, because starvation doesn't care about pride. Women cook and starve, serving men first their own plates empty. Minorities in the town's Jewish quarter eat differently. Their faith-shaping meals under the weight of exclusion, their lentils a defiance you admire but can't share. Even monks with their simple fish and cheese eat better than you. Their vows of poverty, a cruel joke when your kids are crying for a crust. Every bite's a risk, and not just from rot. You've heard the superstitions, spill salt and you're cursed. Waste bread and the harvest fails. You're careful your spoon steady because the village blames witches for bad food, and you've smelled the smoke of their pyres. Doctors are no help, their leeches and purges more likely to kill you than cure you, blaming your stew while charging your last coin. Markets are fraud fests, with butchers selling horse as beef and bakers bulking flour with sawdust. You've eaten it all because hunger's louder than doubt. But each meal's a question. Will this bread make you see stars? Will this ale settle your thirst or your fate? You're not dining, you're surviving a gauntlet, and dessert's a dream you'll never reach. You think about today's world where food's still a challenge for some, but nothing like this. Picture a cooking show where contestants race to make gourmet dishes. Their biggest worry? A bad review. Now make it involuntary. The ingredients spoiled the prize just living another day. Or imagine your grocery delivery failing, but instead of takeout, you're eating mouldy leftovers or nothing at all. Modern folks fret over clean eating or diet trends, but you're dodging dysentery with every sip your kitchen, a battlefield with no rules. You'd trade your ale for their tap water, your gruel for their pizza, because their food fights are choices, not life or death bets. The twist is, what stings a truth that makes you push your plate away. You've seen the tapestries, heard the songs romanticising medieval feasts as grand affairs of chivalry and bounty. But that's a lie, a glossy filter on a brutal reality. The nobles' feasts were political stunts, their swans and spices a flex sometimes laced with poison for a rival. For you and most others, a meal was a prayer. Please let this bread be safe. Please let this water not kill me. You're not toasting with knights. You're chewing grit hoping your stomach holds. History nerds might dream of castle banquets, but you're living the truth. Eating was a gamble, and most were just trying to survive the next bite. You force down the fish, its oily aftertaste clinging to your throat, and drain your ale. The tavern's noise fading as you focus on staying alive. The bread's gone, the gruel too, and you're still here for now. You stand, your legs shaky, and head into the cold night, the village dark, its hunger, a shared heartbeat. You've survived this meal, but tomorrow's another roll of the dice, another plate of risks. You pull your cloak tight, the stars cold above, and keep walking because that's what you do. Eat, pray, survive until the next meal tries to take you down. Outro, thanks for surviving this wild 2.5-hour ride through the absolute nightmare that was medieval food. If your stomach's still growling, maybe stick to pizza, trust me. It's safer than anything we've talked about. Hit that like button if you laughed, shivered, or learned something totally cursed about mouldy bread or poisoned wine. Subscribe for more history rants that'll make you glad you've got a fridge and running water. Drop a comment below. What's the grossest medieval food you'd never ever try? Rat stew, sawdust bread, or maybe that sketchy stream water? I'm dying to know. See you next time, unless we're eating together in the 1300s, then buddy, you're on your own.